He deserves nice things, unlike some people. My mother's words sliced through the air of our family's living room, sharp enough to draw blood. I'd heard variations of this phrase throughout my life, but today, something inside me finally snapped. I'm Martina, 31, and I've spent the last decade being my family's ATM. The funny thing? I never planned it this way, but here I was, standing in my parents' dated living room, staring at a Tesla brochure my brother Trey had strategically left on the coffee table. It's eco-friendly, my mother Serenity cooed, running her manicured fingers over the glossy pages. Trey's really thinking about his carbon footprint. Isn't that admirable? I fought the urge to laugh. Trey, who had never held a job longer than 3 months, was suddenly an environmental activist? The same brother who'd borrowed my credit card last month to buy designer sneakers? Mom, the down payment alone is $40,000, I said, keeping my voice level. That's not exactly pocket change. My father Walker shifted uncomfortably in his recliner, pretending to be absorbed in his crossword puzzle. Typical. He'd perfected the art of invisible presence years ago. Oh, please. Mom waved her hand dismissively. You make 6 figures. What else are you spending it on? That tiny apartment of yours? The familiar knot formed in my stomach. The one that appeared whenever they minimized my achievements while elevating Trey's latest whim. I'd bought that apartment on my own, worked overtime for years to afford it, but somehow it was always tiny or modest in their eyes. I have responsibilities, Mom. My mortgage, retirement savings. Family is a responsibility too, she cut me off, her voice taking on that guilt-inducing tremor I knew too well. Your brother has vision. He's planning to start a luxury brand, and he needs to project the right image. The right car makes all the difference in that world. Trey chose that moment to bounce into the room, all 26 years of entitled energy wrapped in designer clothes I'd probably inadvertently funded. Did you show her? The white one, right? I was thinking of getting the interior customized with sustainable leather. I closed my eyes briefly. Sustainable leather for a car you can't afford? Don't be bitter, sis, Trey smirked. Just because you choose to live like a minimalist doesn't mean everyone has to. Mom nodded approvingly at him before turning back to me. The transfer needs to be done by Friday. The dealership won't hold it much longer. I haven't even agreed. Martina! Mom's voice cracked like a whip. After everything we've done for you, all the sacrifices we made for your education, this is how you repay us? I watched Dad sink deeper into his crossword puzzle, and something shifted inside me. A lifetime of memories flashed through my mind. My academic achievements met with lukewarm praise. My promotions celebrated only as opportunities to help Trey. My savings repeatedly drained for his failed ventures. You're right, I said slowly, surprising everyone, including myself. I'll make the transfer. Mom's face lit up with triumphant satisfaction. Trey pumped his fist and started rambling about color options. Dad even glanced up from his puzzle, offering a brief nod of approval. They didn't notice my smile. They never noticed anything about me unless it involved my wallet. They didn't see how it didn't quite reach my eyes, or how my hands had stopped shaking. They didn't realize that sometimes, when something breaks, it breaks forward. I pulled out my phone, making a show of opening my banking app. I'll take care of it first thing tomorrow, I promised, my voice honey-sweet. That's my responsible girl, Mom beamed, already turning her attention back to Trey. Now, sweetheart, tell me more about this sustainable leather. I sat there, nodding along to Trey's excited chatter about his future luxury brand, about how this car would be the perfect starting point, about all his plans that had always somehow required my money to materialize. But for the first time in years, I felt light, free, because they had no idea that tomorrow I wouldn't be transferring money to the dealership. Tomorrow, I would be executing a plan that had been forming in my mind for months, maybe years. A plan that would teach them exactly what responsibility meant. I smiled again, and this time it reached my eyes. Sometimes the biggest revenge isn't in what you do, it's in what you stop doing. I should head home, I said, standing up. Big day tomorrow. They had no idea just how big it would be. You're doing what? Zoe nearly choked on her coffee. We were sitting in our usual corner of the local cafe, away from the morning rush. Girl, it's about damn time. I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. Remember when Trey dropped out of college? Mom called me at 2 a.m, crying about how they'd lose their house if they had to keep paying his tuition. And you stepped in, Zoe said, her eyes narrowing. Like you always do. $40,000. My entire savings at the time. I laughed bitterly. He switched to pursuing his passion for fashion instead. That t-shirt brand that lasted exactly 3 weeks. Supreme Vibes, Zoe rolled her eyes. The logo looked like it was made in MS Paint. The barista called out someone's name, and I flinched, still on edge from yesterday's confrontation. After that, Mom convinced me to set up that joint household account. Said it was the adult thing to do, to help with bills since I was working. Family takes care of family. Family doesn't drain you dry, Zoe countered. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. Look at this. That Europe trip Trey took last summer? He posted about staying at the Ritz in Paris. The Ritz, Martina. I didn't need to look. I knew exactly how much that trip had cost. It came from the joint account. I called Craig this morning, I said quietly. The family banker? What did he say? He was interesting. Asked if I knew about the mortgage payments being 3 months behind. Zoe's jaw dropped. They didn't tell you? Nope. But they want me to buy Trey a Tesla. I pulled out my own phone, opening my banking app. Craig helped me set up a new account. Everything's getting transferred there today. What about the joint account? I'm closing it. Already called the utility companies to reroute the bills back to my parents' names. My hands were shaking slightly as I typed in my password. They're adults. They can figure it out. They're going to lose their minds, Zoe warned, but she was smiling. What about your brother's car? What about it? I hit confirm on the transfer. He can buy it himself when he gets a job. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Jarvis, my coworker. Coffee run? Need to discuss the Henderson account. Speaking of jobs, I showed Zoe the text. Jarvis has been asking questions lately about why I never go on vacation, why I always work overtime. He likes you, Zoe waggled her eyebrows, and he's not wrong to ask. Normal people don't work 60-hour weeks to fund their brother's luxury lifestyle. We gathered our things and headed out. The morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of change. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time. I declined the call. What if they're right? I asked suddenly, stopping on the sidewalk. What if I am being selfish? Zoe grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. Listen to me. Last month, you skipped your dentist appointment because Trey needed new golf clubs. The month before that, you canceled your therapy sessions to cover their property taxes. That's not selfish. That's being exploited. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Craig. Just saw the mortgage notice. Want me to reach out to your parents? No, I typed back. Let them handle it. At work, Jarvis was waiting by my desk with 2 fresh coffees. You look different today, he said, handing me one. Different how? Lighter. He leaned against my desk. Like you finally put down something heavy you've been carrying. I thought about the joint account, now empty and scheduled for closure. About the utilities being switched back. About the Tesla that would never materialize in Trey's driveway. Maybe I did, I smiled, taking a sip of coffee. My phone lit up again. Dad this time. The text made my stomach clench. Why is the mortgage company calling me about $5,000 due? Jarvis noticed my expression change. Everything okay? I looked at him, then at the text, then back at my coffee. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. You know what? Everything's actually perfect. Because sometimes perfect isn't about having everything go right. Sometimes it's about finally letting everything go wrong in exactly the right way. I turned my phone face down and opened my laptop. The Henderson account could wait. I had some apartment listings to browse, preferably in a neighborhood far from my parents' house. "Want to grab lunch later?" Jarvis asked, heading back to his desk. "You seem like you might have an interesting story to tell." I smiled. He had no idea how interesting it was about to get. "The internship fell through again." Trey's voice crackled through my phone speaker. "Bad timing, you know how it is. But hey, I found this amazing custom leather shop for the Tesla. They can do this sick diamond pattern." "Trey," I cut him off, watching the cursor blink on my work computer. "There isn't going to be a Tesla." "What? But Mom said you already agreed." His voice rose an octave. "You promised." "No," Mom assumed. "There's a difference." I clicked through another apartment listing. This one looked promising. 20 miles from my parents' house. "You're just jealous," he spat. "You've always been jealous that I have actual dreams while you waste away in your boring corporate job." I laughed, surprising both of us. "My boring corporate job that pays for your dreams? That one? Whatever. Mom's right. You're being selfish. I'll just ask her to—" "Go ahead," I interrupted. "Ask her for whatever you want. But the money's gone, Trey. All of it." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, "What do you mean, gone?" I closed the apartment listing and opened my email. Exactly what I said. The joint account is closed. Bills are back in Mom and Dad's names. You want a Tesla? Get a job. He hung up. I counted backward from 10, waiting for the inevitable call from Mom. Right on cue, my phone lit up with her name. "The transfer never went through," she said immediately, skipping any greeting. "The dealership called Trey." "What's going on?" "Nothing's going through, Mom. Not anymore. Don't be ridiculous. Just make the transfer now and—" "The account is closed." Another deadly silence. Then, "You what?" "You heard me." My voice was steady, even as my hands shook. "I closed it. All of it. You ungrateful little—" she sputtered. "After everything we've done for you? This is how you repay us?" Jarvis chose that moment to stop by my desk, coffee in hand. He raised an eyebrow at my expression, but I waved him away. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated. "Like what, Mom? Making me feel guilty for every success? Treating me like an ATM? We gave you life," she shrieked. "We put you through college, which I've paid back 3 times over." I lowered my voice, aware of my coworkers. "I'm done, Mom. The Bank of Martina is closed." She switched tactics, her voice suddenly trembling. "The mortgage company. They're threatening foreclosure. We need you, sweetheart. Family helps family." "Yes," I agreed. "Family helps family. But this isn't help anymore, is it? It's exploitation." She hung up. I stared at my phone, waiting for the guilt to hit. It didn't come. "Tough call?" Jarvis placed the coffee on my desk, settling into the chair beside me. "Family stuff," I muttered. "Ah." He nodded sagely. "The kind where they give as much as they take, or the kind where they just take?" I looked at him sharply. "What makes you ask that?" "Experience," he shrugged. "My sister was like that. Always needed temporary help that somehow became permanent. Took me years to learn the word no." My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Why is the mortgage company calling me about $5,000 due?" "How did you do it?" I asked Jarvis. "Say no, I mean." I realized I wasn't actually helping her by enabling her. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their own actions. I picked up my coffee, letting its warmth seep into my cold fingers. Even if those consequences hurt them? Especially then. He stood up, straightening his tie. "Want to grab dinner later? You look like you could use a friendly ear." Before I could answer, my phone lit up again. A string of texts from Trey. "You can't do this to me. The dealership is giving my slot to someone else. I told people about this car. You're ruining everything." I turned my phone face down. "Dinner sounds great," I told Jarvis. "I definitely have some stories to tell." He smiled and headed back to his desk. I opened my email to find a message from Craig. "Your parents are asking about temporary overdraft options. Should I direct them to our financial advisory service?" I typed back a single word. "Yes." My phone kept buzzing, but I ignored it. Instead, I pulled up the apartment listing again. The one 20 miles away. The one with the balcony and the view of the park. The one where my family couldn't just drop by. Sometimes the hardest part isn't saying no. It's maintaining that no when the guilt trips and manipulations start rolling in. But as I clicked Schedule Viewing on the apartment listing, I realized something. Their emotional terrorism only worked if I allowed it to. And I wasn't allowing it anymore. "Last box," Zoe announced, dropping a cardboard container labeled kitchen onto my new apartment's floor. "I still can't believe you're really doing this." The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the empty space that would become my new home. 23 miles from my parents' house. I'd checked. 47 missed calls, I said, glancing at my phone. 28 from Mom, 15 from Dad, and 4 from numbers I don't recognize. "Probably calling from other phones since you blocked them," Zoe snorted, unpacking dishes. "How long has it been?" 6 days since I closed the account. 4 since I stopped answering their calls. I started arranging books on the built-in shelves. Mom's Facebook posts are getting creative. Oh, I saw those. Prayer request for my troubled daughter who's lost her way. Real subtle. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the peephole, I saw Jarvis holding coffee cups and a paper bag. "Breakfast delivery," he announced when I opened the door. "Figured you could use fuel for unpacking." "You're a lifesaver," I said, accepting a coffee. "Though I'm starting to think you have ulterior motives with all these coffee runs." He grinned. "Is it working?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Craig's name flashed on the screen. "Martina." His voice was hesitant. "Your parents were just in my office. They're asking about loan options." I sat on an unopened box. "And?" "Their credit isn't great. The missed mortgage payments. Listen, I had to tell them about the overdraft fees from last year, the ones you covered." "They didn't know about those?" "Apparently not." He paused. They seemed shocked. I ended the call just as Zoe emerged from the kitchen. "Hey, where do you want these?" "Oh, hi, Jarvis." The three of us settled on the floor, sharing croissants and coffee, when a loud banging made us all freeze. "Martina, open up! I know you're in there." Trey's voice echoed through the door, angry and slightly slurred, despite it being barely noon. "How did he find you?" Zoe whispered. "Probably followed me from work," I muttered, remembering the car I'd glimpsed in my rearview mirror. The banging continued. "You ruined everything. The dealership canceled my order. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" Jarvis stood up, moving toward the door, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't. He'll leave eventually." "You've always been jealous," Trey shouted. "Just because you're too boring to have dreams, too pathetic to do anything but work and save money like some robot." "Should I call security?" Zoe reached for her phone. I shook my head, walking to the door. "No, it's time I handled this." I opened the door to find Trey, disheveled and red-faced, his designer clothes wrinkled. "Well, look who finally—" "You're drunk," I cut him off. "At 11 in the morning. Real classy." "You destroyed my life." "Your life?" I stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind me. "You mean the life I've been funding? The one where you've never held a job longer than 3 months? That life? I had opportunities, important connections." "No, Trey. You had me. My money. My credit cards. My savings." I kept my voice level. And now you don't. He ran his hands through his hair, desperate. I need that car, Martina. People are expecting it. I promised. Not my problem anymore. Mom and Dad can't even pay their bills. They might lose the house. Also not my problem. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Not really. You've always said you'd protect me, he whispered, trying one last guilt trip. What changed? I realized I was protecting you from the wrong thing, I replied. I wasn't protecting you from failure or hardship. I was protecting you from growing up. You're my sister, he said, as if that explained everything. Yes, I am. Not your bank, not your safety net, not your enabler. Just your sister. I reached for the door handle. And as your sister, I'm telling you, get your life together. Or what? Or don't. But either way, you'll be doing it without my money. I went back inside, leaving him in the hallway. Zoe and Jarvis looked up from their coffees, concern etched on their faces. You okay? Jarvis asked. I listened to Trey's footsteps fade away, followed by the distant ding of the elevator. Through the windows, I could see the park I'd fallen in love with during the viewing. My park now. My view. My life. You know what? I picked up my coffee, still warm. I really am. Because sometimes the hardest conversations aren't the ones that make you cry. They're the ones that finally set you free. If you love your brother, you'll share. The memory of Mom's voice echoed in my head as I stared at the email from her. It was the first direct communication in weeks that wasn't a guilt trip Facebook post or a message through relatives. We're selling the house, the email read. Your father and I thought you should know, since you grew up here. Trey's devastated. I hope you're happy with what you've done to this family. I was at my desk at work, but my mind wandered to that house, to the marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking Trey's height, but not mine, to the wall of photos showcasing his achievements while my college graduation picture sat in a drawer. Earth to Martina. Jarvis waved a hand in front of my face. Lunch? Rain check? I need to handle something. He studied my face. Family stuff again? They're selling the house. And that's your problem because... Before I could answer, my phone lit up with Trey's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. How could you do this to them? He demanded. To me? I had to move back in with them. Did you know that? My landlord evicted me. Maybe you should have paid your rent instead of buying designer clothes. I had plans. Important meetings. Do you know how it looks? Taking the bus to networking events? I rubbed my temples. Get a job, Trey. I had 3 interviews this month. And? The positions weren't aligned with my vision. You mean they expected you to actually work? He made a frustrated sound. You've always said you'd protect me. What changed? That phrase again. The same one he'd used at my apartment. But this time, it triggered something different. You want to know what changed? My voice was steel. I did. I'm not that little girl anymore, the one Mom convinced to share everything because that's what good sisters do. I'm done sharing my life so you don't have to build yours. You're being dramatic. Am I? Remember my graduation money? The money Grandma left specifically for me? Mom made me share that too. For your first failed business venture. That wasn't my fault. The market, it's never your fault, is it? It's always the market, or bad timing, or unfair circumstances. Never the fact that you won't get off your ass and work. Silence. Then, Mom was right. You are bitter. I laughed. Actually laughed. No, Trey. I'm awake. The elevator dinged, and I looked up to see Mom walking through our office doors. My stomach dropped. I have to go, I told Trey, hanging up. Mom spotted me, making a beeline for my desk. Her designer handbag was last season's, I noticed. Her shoes weren't new either. We need to talk, she announced, loud enough for my coworkers to hear. I'm working. You can spare 5 minutes for your mother. She pulled up a chair, uninvited. The mortgage company. No. You haven't even heard what I... The answer is no. I kept my voice low but firm. No more money. No more bailouts. No more enabling. Enabling? Her eyes narrowed. Is that what your therapist told you? The one you waste money on instead of helping your family? Actually, I learned that word from watching you and Dad enable Trey for 26 years. We supported him, like parents should. No, I corrected. I supported him, with my money, my savings, my future. You just took credit for it. She leaned forward, dropping her voice. If you don't help us with this mortgage situation, we'll lose everything. Maybe you should have thought about that before missing payments while buying Trey designer clothes. He needs to maintain an image. He needs to grow up. I stood up, drawing stares. And so do you. Mom's face crumpled, tears appearing on cue. How can you be so cruel? After everything we've sacrificed. What exactly did you sacrifice, Mom? Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one who's been sacrificing anything. She stood too, trembling. I don't even recognize you anymore. Good, I said, and meant it. Because I don't recognize myself either. I like this version better. She left in a flurry of fake tears and real anger, leaving behind the scent of her expensive perfume and the weight of decades of manipulation. Jarvis appeared at my desk moments later. So, lunch? I grabbed my purse, suddenly starving. You know what? Yes, and I'm having dessert. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in what you do to others. It's in what you finally allow yourself to do for yourself. As we headed to the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. They're threatening foreclosure. I deleted it without responding. Their problems weren't my problems anymore. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt exactly right. Have you seen this? Zoe thrust her phone in my face during our weekly coffee meetup. On the screen was Mom's latest Facebook post. Heartbroken that my own daughter would abandon her family in our time of need. Some people become so obsessed with money they forget the meaning of love. Please pray for my Martina's soul. Greed has poisoned her heart. 43 sympathetic comments followed. Crying emojis. Promises of prayer. Condemnation of my cruelty. She's really playing the victim card hard, I muttered, pushing the phone away. Your Aunt Susan called me, Zoe said. Wanted to know if you'd joined a cult. I nearly choked on my latte. A cult? Apparently, your mom's telling people you've fallen in with bad influences who've turned you against family values. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I'd been getting calls all week from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Maybe I should make my own post, I said. Tell them about the 40 grand I gave Trey for his failed t-shirt business, or the credit cards I paid off, or... Don't, Jarvis interrupted, joining us with fresh coffees. That's what they want, to drag you into their drama. Speaking of drama, Zoe scrolled through her phone. Your brother's posting too. Something about toxic family members who pretend to care but only want control. I grabbed her phone. Sure enough, there was Trey's post, complete with a moody black and white selfie. Sometimes those closest to you are the ones who hold you back. They say they're protecting you, but they're really just controlling you. Toxic bang healing, da authenticity. The irony, I laughed, but it came out hollow. You okay? Jarvis asked, sliding closer. I don't know. I stared into my coffee. I mean, I know I did the right thing, but it still hurts, he finished. My phone lit up again. This time it was my cousin Phoebe. I always knew you were the scapegoat. Mom used to talk about how Aunt Serenity played favorites. Call me if you need to talk. The flying monkeys are circling, Zoe observed. Your mom's rallying the troops. Let her, I said, but my hands were shaking. She can't guilt me anymore. Just then, a text from Dad appeared. Your mother's had to start working at the mall. Is this what you wanted? Block him, Jarvis advised. seeing my expression. Block them all. I can't just. Yes, you can. He took my phone, scrolling through contacts. Look, revenge isn't always clean. Sometimes it gets messy. Sometimes it hurts people you didn't mean to hurt. But that doesn't make it wrong. When did you get so wise? I asked, trying to smile. When I watched my best friend finally stand up for herself. My phone buzzed again. An email from Craig. Thought you should know. Your parents are asking about reverse mortgages. Dangerous territory. Should I intervene? No, I typed back. Not my circus anymore. Zoe leaned forward. You know what we should do? Take that vacation you've been putting off for years. The one your mom always said was selfish when Trey needed something. I can't just. Yes, you can. She pulled up a travel site. Look, flights to Hawaii are on sale. 2 weeks of no family drama, no guilt trips, just beach and Mai Tais. I'll come too, Jarvis offered casually. You know, for moral support. I looked between them, my best friend and whatever Jarvis was becoming, and felt something warm in my chest. Something that felt like possibility. Another notification popped up. Mom had tagged me in a new post. When children forget their roots, they lose their way. But a mother's love never dies, even when it's betrayed. Book it, I told Zoe, suddenly decisive. Book the trip, she squealed, fingers flying over her phone. Jarvis grinned, squeezing my hand under the table. My phone lit up one last time. A message from Trey. Mom's crying herself to sleep every night. Hope you're happy with yourself. I stared at the message, feeling the old guilt rise up. But then I remembered all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, worried about bills I shouldn't have had to pay, stressed about problems that were never mine to solve. I am happy, I typed back, for the first time in years. Then I blocked his number too, because sometimes happiness looks like a blocked contact list. Sometimes it looks like a vacation you finally allow yourself to take. And sometimes, most importantly, it looks like choosing yourself over the people who never chose you. 3 tickets to Hawaii, Zoe announced triumphantly. No refunds, no backing out. I raised my coffee cup. To burning bridges. And building new ones, Jarvis added, clinking his cup against mine. The for sale sign in front of my childhood home looked smaller than I expected. I sat in my car across the street, watching potential buyers file in and out. Mom's prized rose bushes were wilting. Dad's meticulously maintained lawn had brown patches. You shouldn't be here, Zoe's voice crackled through my phone speaker. I know. I watched another couple walk through the front door. But I needed to see it. We leave for Hawaii tomorrow. Don't let them drag you back in. A familiar car pulled into the driveway, Trey's old BMW. The one I'd helped him buy 3 years ago. He got out looking different. Cheaper clothes, no designer sunglasses. Reality had finally come knocking. I have to go, I told Zoe. I'll call you later. I was about to start my car when another vehicle pulled up. Mom's SUV. She stepped out wearing a mall store uniform, her name tag still pinned to her chest. My stomach clenched. Then I saw Aunt Susan's minivan parking behind them, and Uncle Robert's truck, and Cousin Phoebe's sedan. Oh no, I muttered, recognizing the setup. They were staging an intervention. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. We know you're across the street. Please come inside. Family meeting. I should have driven away. Should have gone home to finish packing for Hawaii. Instead, I found myself walking toward the house I'd grown up in. She came, Mom announced as I entered. The living room was packed with relatives. Some looked sympathetic, others accusatory. Trey sat in the corner, unusually quiet. What is this? I asked, though I knew. We're here because we love you, Aunt Susan started. Your mother is worried. My mother is worried about money, I corrected. Not me. That's not true. Mom stepped forward, tears ready. We're worried about your soul. This vindictive behavior. Vindictive, I laughed. Is that what you call financial independence? You abandoned us! Trey suddenly exploded from his corner. Left us drowning in bills. Your bills, I shot back. Your loans. Your failed businesses. Your Tesla dreams. That's enough, Dad stood up. We're here to fix this family. Fix what? I demanded. Fix the fact that I finally said no? Fix the fact that your retirement plan can't rely on my salary anymore? The room fell silent. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. I had to get a job at the mall, Mom whispered dramatically. At my age? Welcome to reality, I said, where most people work for a living. You're being cruel, Aunt Susan accused. No, I'm being honest. For the first time in my life. I turned to face them all. You want to know what's cruel? Making your daughter feel responsible for your mortgage at 22? Guilting her into funding her brother's delusions instead of her own dreams? That's cruel. We gave you everything, Mom shouted. No, I gave you everything. My savings, my 20s, my peace of mind. My voice cracked. And you know what the worst part is? You never even said thank you. Trey stood up suddenly. She's right. Everyone turned to stare at him. What? Mom gasped. She's right, he repeated, looking sick. We used her. All of us. I used her. He looked at me. I knew you'd always say yes. It was easier than growing up. Mom's face turned purple. Trey, don't let her manipulate. Stop it, Mom, he shouted. Just stop. Look at yourself. You're wearing a mall uniform and still trying to pretend everything's fine. It's not fine. We did this to ourselves. To her. The room erupted into chaos. Relatives taking sides. Mom crying. Dad trying to mediate. But I just watched Trey, seeing him clearly, maybe for the first time ever. I'm sorry, he said quietly, while the others argued. I really am. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Your brother's just confused, Mom insisted. Martina, if you'd just help us through this rough patch. No. I headed for the door. I'm done. The house will sell or it won't. You'll figure it out or you won't. But I'm not your safety net anymore. You told me I was selfish, I added, hand on the doorknob. Turns out, selfish is the only thing that saved me. I walked out, ignoring the calls behind me. In my car, I found a text from Jarvis. All packed for tomorrow. You okay? I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see Trey arguing with Mom, finally standing up to her manipulation. Sometimes karma works in unexpected ways. You know what? I typed back. I really am. Because sometimes the biggest victories don't come with fanfare. They come in quiet moments of walking away, of choosing yourself, of finally being free. The ocean breeze carried away the last bits of tension from my shoulders as I sat on my balcony, watching the Hawaiian sunset. Zoe dozed in the chair beside me, and Jarvis was inside ordering dinner. My phone lit up with a text from Craig. House sold today, above asking price. I took a deep breath, letting the information settle. The last tie, finally cut. Good news? Jarvis asked, stepping onto the balcony with 3 Mai Tais. The house sold. Zoe stirred. How does that make you feel? Before I could answer, another text came through. This one from Trey. I see it now. I'm sorry. I showed them the message. Are you going to respond? Zoe asked. No. I set the phone down. Some bridges need to stay burned. Speaking of burning, Jarvis grinned, your nose is getting red. More sunscreen? I touched my nose, laughing. A real laugh, free from the weight of family obligation. Worth it. First vacation in 8 years. First of many, he promised, squeezing my hand. My phone buzzed again. Mom's number, though I'd blocked it. She must be using a different phone. Your father had to take a second job, the text read. Is this what you wanted? I deleted it without responding. Their problems weren't mine anymore. They never should have been. Look what I found. Zoe sat up, scrolling through her phone. Remember that therapy retreat I told you about? The one in Colorado? They have an opening next month. I can't. I started automatically, then caught myself. Actually, yes. Book it. Who are you and what have you done with Martina? She teased. She grew up, Jarvis answered for me. Finally. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Below our balcony, waves crashed against the shore in a steady rhythm. Craig sent me their new address, I said quietly. They downsized to an apartment across town. And? Zoe prompted. And nothing. I'm not saving that information. Jarvis raised his glass. To new beginnings. To boundaries, Zoe added. To freedom, I finished. My phone lit up one final time, a Facebook notification. Mom had posted again. Sometimes the hardest part of being a mother is watching your children make mistakes, but they'll always be welcome home when they realize family is everything. I clicked unfriend without hesitation. You know what the funny thing is? I said, watching a group of kids playing in the surf below. They always said I was the sensible one, the practical one, like it was an insult. And now? Jarvis asked. Now I realize being practical saved me. Being sensible meant I could build this life. I gestured to the ocean view, the luxury resort, the freedom to choose. While they were living in fantasy, I was building reality. Speaking of reality, Zoe sat up straighter. Jarvis, didn't you have something to ask Martina? He shot her a look, then turned to me. I was going to wait, but dinner tomorrow? Just us? I smiled. Just us sounds perfect. My phone stayed quiet now. No more guilt trips. No more emergencies. No more demands disguised as love. I should journal this, I said, pulling out the notebook I'd started when all this began. Not every daughter is born to serve a family. Some are born to end the cycle. Deep, Zoe nodded approvingly. Very Instagram-worthy. We laughed, and the sound carried across the water, free and light. Below us, a family walked along the beach, parents holding hands with their children, everyone equal, everyone valued. That's how it should be, I said softly. Family lifting each other up, not dragging each other down. You'll build that, Jarvis said confidently. Your own kind of family. I looked at him, then at Zoe, then at the ocean stretching endlessly before us. They were right. Family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's the friends who stand by you when you're breaking free. Sometimes it's the coworker who becomes something more. Sometimes it's just yourself, finally whole. The sun disappeared below the horizon, taking with it the last traces of guilt, of obligation, of the person I used to be. In its place, it left something better. Peace. Not the peace that comes from giving in, but the peace that comes from standing firm. Not the peace of surrender, but the peace of victory. I closed my journal and reached for Jarvis's hand. Tomorrow would bring its own adventures, its own choices, its own joy. But for now, this moment was enough. Watching the stars appear over the Pacific, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not what I could give them. This was freedom. This was healing. This was home.
Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood outside Chicago, my life felt simple and predictable. My dad, Tom, spent 30 years working on the police force before retiring, and my mom, Sarah, has been a secretary at Lincoln Elementary for as long as I can remember. They gave me everything they could, but we never had much money. I'm Tasha Mitchell, or at least I was before I became Tasha Reynolds. After college, I earned an accounting degree and landed a job at Anderson & Partners, a mid-sized firm. The pay was decent, the work steady, and I thought that would be my life. Wake up, go to work, come home, and repeat. But that all changed one rainy Tuesday in October when I literally bumped into Marcus outside Starbucks. I was rushing for my morning coffee before work and he was headed to some important meeting. My coffee splashed all over his expensive suit, and I could have crawled into a hole right then and there. "I'm so sorry," I said, frantically dabbing at his jacket with napkins. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning, I swear." Instead of getting mad, he laughed. "Don't worry about it, but you could make it up to me by having dinner with me tonight." One dinner turned into several, and Marcus was unlike anyone I'd ever dated. He was the son of James and Victoria Reynolds, owners of Reynolds Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the Midwest. But Marcus never made me feel beneath him. He loved that I came from a real family, as he put it. Then came the day I met his parents at their mansion in Lake Forest. I'll never forget the way Victoria looked at me, like I was something stuck to her shoe. "So, Tasha," she said, swirling her wine glass, "Marcus tells us you're an accountant." "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "How practical," she said, her smile as thin as her tone. "When I told her about my dad being a retired cop and my mom a school secretary, you think I confessed they were criminals." James barely spoke to me during dinner, only addressing Marcus about work. 3 months later, when Marcus proposed, I said yes without hesitation, convinced I could win over his parents with time. I thought love would be enough. After our honeymoon in Bali, Marcus and I moved into his luxury apartment in downtown Chicago. The place was bigger than my parents' entire house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It felt like I was living in a dream. 2 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Marcus was over the moon, spinning me around our enormous living room when I told him. Even Victoria and James softened a bit. The Victoria couldn't help but remark, "Well, at least the child will have good breeding on one side." Our son, James Jr., or JJ as we called him, was born on a snowy December morning. The moment I held him, nothing else mattered. Not Victoria's constant criticisms, not the whispers at Reynolds Industries about the accountant who married the boss's son. JJ was perfect. The first 2 years of parenthood were good. Marcus was a natural with JJ, coming home early to play with him, reading him bedtime stories, and taking us both to the park on weekends. Marcus thrived as the financial director at Reynolds, and I worked part-time from home as an accountant while taking care of JJ in our home. Victoria and James might not have liked me, but they showered their grandson with expensive gifts and insisted on regular visits. But something shifted around Jay's third birthday. Marcus began coming home later and later, always with the same excuse: "Big project at work, honey." You wouldn't understand. The man who once rushed home to see his son now barely made it in time for bedtime. Then came that Thursday when Victoria showed up unannounced at our apartment, her air scarf perfectly arranged despite the wind. "Would you care to explain," she said, walking in without waiting for an invitation, "why you weren't at the company's annual gala last night?" Confused, I stared at her. "What gala?" "Don't play dumb, Tasha," she said, her eyes narrowing. "The Reynolds Industries anniversary gala. Every executive and their wife was there, except you." My stomach sank. I didn't know about any gala. Victoria's eyes narrowed further. "Marcus said you weren't feeling well." "Are you telling me my son lied?" she asked, her voice growing sharp. That night, I waited up until Marcus came home at 11:30 p.m. He loosened his tie as he walked in, stopping short when he saw me sitting in the dark living room. "Why didn't you tell me about the gala?" I asked quietly. He sighed, pouring himself a scotch. "Look, Tasha, let's be honest. You wouldn't have fit in. The other wives know how to carry themselves. They discuss art, wine, summer homes in the Hamptons. What would you have talked about? Your dad's police stories? Your mom's work in the cafeteria?" His words felt like a slap in the face. "I'm your wife, Marcus. You're supposed to be proud of me, not ashamed." "I was proud of you when we were dating," he replied, "but I'm the financial director now. I need a wife who can be more." I went to bed crying that night, telling myself it was just work stress, that things would get better. But deep down, I knew something had broken between us, something I wasn't sure could be fixed. It was a Tuesday when my world fell apart. Marcus texted that he was working late again, and I was cleaning around the apartment when I came across his open laptop on his desk. I'd never snooped before, but something about the screen caught my eye. I sat down at his desk, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. An email thread with someone named Sofia Loran. My hand shook as I read their messages. Hundreds of them, dating back months. Sophia had been hired a year ago as a new marketing executive at Reynolds. They spoke about me like I was a joke, the simple-minded wife who had no idea what was going on. There were pictures of jewelry Marcus bought her, weekend trips he took with her while telling me he was at business conferences. I stayed up all night, copying everything to a USB drive, printing key emails, taking screenshots. When Marcus came home at 7 a.m., his shirt wrinkled and tie loose, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the evidence spread out in front of me. Care to explain? I asked quietly, holding up one of the printed emails. He laughed, as if it was a casual conversation. Come on, Tasha. Did you really think you were enough? Sophia is everything you're not. Sophisticated, sexy, exciting. When's the last time you even tried to look good for me? I've been taking care of our son while you've been screwing around, I shouted. Marcus poured himself a coffee like we were talking about the weather. Here's how this is going to work. You'll stay my wife on paper. It's better for my image at the company. Sophia understands. And hey, he added with a nasty grin, maybe I'll even find time for you occasionally, if you're lucky. Tears blurred my vision as I grabbed JJ's backpack, stuffing clothes inside. JJ was still asleep, clutching his favorite teddy bear. I gently woke him. Baby, we're going to visit Grandma and Grandpa for a while, okay? Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching us. You'll be back. Where else could you possibly go? I walked past him, taking my son and my purse, along with the USB drive, and didn't say another word. By the time we reached my parents' house, I was a mess. Mom opened the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. 3 days later, the divorce papers arrived. Victoria Reynolds personally delivered them, wearing the smug smirk. I always knew you weren't good enough for my son, she said, handing me the envelope. I'm just glad he finally realized it too. But the worst was yet to come. Marcus wasn't just filing for divorce, he was suing for full custody of JJ. His lawyer filed papers claiming, during the first hearing, Marcus's lawyer painted a picture of me that was far from the truth. Mrs. Reynolds has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior over the past year, he argued. She drinks excessively, creates unwarranted scenes of jealousy, and has become unstable. Fortunately, I had been smart enough to gather evidence. When my lawyer presented the email exchanges between Marcus and Sophia, revealing his affair and cruel remarks about me, the judge's demeanor shifted. The timestamps on those emails proved I wasn't the one causing drama. I hadn't even known about the affair until I discovered those messages. The judge turned to Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, you claim your wife is unstable, yet these emails show you were the one deceiving and gaslighting her. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit as the judge awarded me primary custody of JJ, with Marcus receiving visitation every other weekend and a substantial child support obligation. I returned to my full-time job at the accounting firm, while my parents, without a second thought, stepped in to help care for JJ during their retirement. They were amazing, never once complaining as they embraced their new role as full-time grandparents. Life settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, peaceful, and fulfilling. Then, one Saturday morning, everything changed. A black Range Rover pulled up in front of my parents' modest house. Marcus stepped out, followed by Sophia, tall, blonde, and clad in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I'm here to see my son, Marcus announced, pushing past me as if he owned the place. Sophia wrinkled her nose and looked around the room. Oh my God, she laughed, picking up one of Mom's cherished family photos. This place is literally a dump, like an actual kennel. Watch your mouth, I snapped. Turning to Marcus, she said, Baby, you can't let your son stay in this hovel. And these old people. She gestured toward my parents, who stood frozen in the doorway. They belong in a ditch somewhere, not raising the Reynolds heir. Get out, I seethed, my body trembling with rage. Both of you. Get out of my parents' house, now. Marcus sneered at me. Or what? You think you've won in court? Just wait. I shoved them both toward the door. Get out. An adult. Sophia purred to Marcus. This place probably has fleas anyway. As they drove away, I stood there, shaking, before pulling my parents into a tight hug. Mom was crying, and Dad looked like he wanted to punch something. But as that Range Rover disappeared down the street, a sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, furious even. The next night, Dad found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of coffee. Sweetheart, he said, sitting down across from me, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. I raised an eyebrow. Remember Mike Sullivan? He worked with me on the force. Now he's a private investigator, real thorough, knows how to dig without leaving a trace. I thought about Sophia's smug face, her cruel words, and the nasty emails she kept sending me. Just that morning, she commented on my LinkedIn profile, "Look at this pathetic 1/8. Can't even afford decent clothes anymore." Marcus wasn't any better. His latest email read, "Every time I pick up JJ and see you in that dump, I remember why I upgraded. Enjoy playing poor with your cop daddy." "How much does Mike charge?" I asked, already knowing my answer. 2 days later, I sat in Mike Sullivan's small downtown office. A gruff man with kind eyes, Mike had known me since I was a kid. Weeks passed as I focused on work and JJ, trying to ignore the constant harassment from Marcus and Sophia. Then Mike called. "You need to come to my office," he said. "You're going to want to see this in person." He handed me a thick file. "First off," he began, "Sophia Loren isn't her real name. She's using her sister's identity. Her real name is Carla Larson." My hand trembled as I read through the file. Before working at Reynolds Industries, Sophia had been an escort, hopping from one rich man to the next, living off their money until they grew tired of her or caught onto her scams. She'd used different names in different cities, always disappearing before things got too hot. But what she was doing at Reynolds Industries was far worse. Mike pointed to some bank transfers. "She's been siphoning small amounts from company accounts. Enough to go unnoticed, but it adds up." He flipped through more pages. "And these emails. She's been selling company information to your in-laws' biggest competitors, product launches, merger plans, everything." I sat back, my mind reeling. The perfect, sophisticated Sophia Loren was nothing but a con artist, and she'd sunk her claws not just into my husband but into the entire Reynolds empire. "There's one more thing," Mike said, pulling out another folder. "Remember that big deal Reynolds Industries lost last month? The one that cost them millions? Sophia sold the bid information to their competitor 3 days before the deadline." I gathered all the evidence carefully, making multiple copies. But I didn't act yet. I knew something Sophia didn't. Timing is everything. The call came on a Wednesday morning. "Tasha," Victoria's cold voice said, "James Reynolds' 60th birthday party is this Saturday. You're invited. JJ should be there for his grandfather's birthday. Since he's too young to come alone, you'll need to escort him." She let the sentence hang in the air, her tone dismissive. "Just remember, you're only invited as JJ's escort. Try to stay in the background and not embarrass anyone." James Reynolds' 60th birthday party was every bit as ostentatious as you'd imagine. The mansion gleamed with gold and crystal, waiters carrying champagne on silver trays. I felt every judgmental gaze as JJ and I walked into the room. "Oh, you came," Victoria said, her smile tight. "Well, JJ, darling, come give your grandmother a kiss." I stood awkwardly by the appetizer table, watching my son being paraded around like some prize show pony. The other guests either ignored me or whispered behind their hands. I clutched my large purse, which contained Mike's file, and waited. Then Marcus walked in with Sophia on his arm. She wore a red Valentino dress that probably cost more than my car, diamonds dripping from her ears. "Everyone," Marcus announced, clinking his glass, "I have an announcement to make." He pulled Sophia closer. "I'd like you all to meet my future wife, Sophia Loren. She'll be joining the Reynolds family officially next spring." Victoria rushed forward to embrace her. Finally, a woman worthy of the Reynolds name. Harvard educated, from a wonderful family, unlike some people, James added, shooting a look at me. Sophia beamed under their attention. "I just feel so blessed to be joining such an esteemed family, and I promise to be the kind of wife Marcus truly deserves." That was my cue. I stood up, hands steady as I pulled out the file. "Speaking of what people deserve," I said loudly, "I have a few things to share about the future Mrs. Reynolds." "Tasha, don't make a scene," Marcus warned. I ignored him, pulling out the first document. "Tell me, Sophia, or should I say Carla Larson, how's your sister feeling about you stealing her identity?" The color drained from Sophia's face. "What is she talking about?" Victoria demanded. "Oh, did she not mention that she's been living under her sister's ID?" I asked, my voice steady. "The real Sophia Loren is a school teacher in Minnesota. This woman," I pointed at her, "is Carla Larson, former escort and con artist. Sophia shrieked, "She's lying." But I was already laying out the evidence: photos, bank statements, police reports. "And here's my personal favorite," I said, pulling out more documents. "Bank transfers showing how she's been stealing from Reynolds Industries. And look at these emails. She's been selling your company's secrets to Wagner Manufacturing and Collins Corp for months." James Reynolds snatched the papers from my hands. "The Wagner deal. The Collins merger. It was you?" "I can explain," Sophia stammered, backing away from Marcus's thunderous face. "The real Carla Larson," I said, savoring the moment, "has quite a history. 7 different cities, 7 different wealthy men, 7 different scams. Looks like Reynolds Industries was going to be number 8. The room went deadly quiet as they read through the evidence. Marcus's confusion, Victoria's horror, James's growing rage, and Sophia, her perfect mask cracking as her house of cards came tumbling down. The elegant birthday party dissolved into chaos in minutes. James Reynolds' face turned an alarming shade of purple as he read the documents. "Get out," he roared at Sophia, who was still trying to stammer out excuses. "Get out of my house before I have you arrested right here." "James, darling," she attempted, reaching for his arm. "These are all lies. I can explain everything." "Explain?" He shook the documents at her. "Explain how you cost us the Wagner deal. That contract was worth $20 million. And Collins, they were our biggest competitor. And you've been feeding them everything." Victoria, who had been quietly reading through the escort service records, looked up, venom in her eyes. "You common prostitute," she hissed. "You thought you could con your way into our family." Sophia backed toward the door, her designer heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. "Marcus, baby, tell them." But Marcus looked like he might be sick, staring at photos of Sophia, or Sophie, with various wealthy men over the years. "If you're not off my property in 30 seconds, James said, his voice deadly quiet, "I'm calling the police. And trust me, you'll be seeing plenty of our lawyers either way." After Sophia fled, James turned to his son, his voice low with fury. "You brought this woman into our company," he said. "Gave her access to confidential information, all because what? She was pretty. Had nice legs?" "Dad, I didn't know." "You didn't know. Didn't check. Just thought with your—" He glanced at JJ and modified his language. "With everything except your brain. You're fired, Marcus. Clear out your office by tomorrow." "But Dad, and that apartment you're living in? Company property. Find somewhere else to live." Victoria, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly turned to me. "Tasha," she said, and for the first time ever, her voice held genuine emotion. "We owe you an apology, a significant one. You saved our company from God knows how much damage." James nodded solemnly. "We were wrong about you. Very wrong. You've proven yourself more worthy of the Reynolds name than others." 3 days later, Sophia was arrested at O'Hare, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. The evidence I gathered, combined with what Reynolds Industries lawyers uncovered, was overwhelming. She was facing serious fraud charges and massive fines. Marcus, I heard, was staying at a friend's condo while he looked for a new job. No other financial firms were eager to hire a man who'd been fired for such catastrophic negligence. It's been 6 months since James Reynolds' birthday party changed everything. I'm sitting in my new apartment. It's not as luxurious as the one I shared with Marcus, but it's perfect for JJ and me. The Reynolds family gave it to me as a token of appreciation for saving their company. The least we could do, James had said, handing me the keys. After everything, well, you understand. The apartment is in a nice neighborhood, close to good schools. Jay's room is decorated with superhero posters, and my little home office overlooks a park. It's not a penthouse with lake views, but it feels like home in a way the luxury apartment never did. Marcus moved to California last month. He calls JJ every Sunday at 7:00 p.m., like clockwork. Their conversations are short. JJ is still too young to talk long on the phone, but at least he's trying to be a father, even from a distance. He never asks to speak to me, and that's fine. Some bridges stay burned. The biggest change has been with the Reynolds family. Victoria stops by at least once a week, usually bearing gifts for JJ and surprisingly for me too. Last week, she brought a beautiful orchid for my windowsill. The real shock came when Victoria and James invited my parents over for dinner. I was nervous. The last time they'd all been in the same room was at my wedding, where the class divide had been palpable. But something had shifted. I watched in amazement as James asked Dad about his years on the force, genuinely interested in his stories. Victoria and Mom talked about gardening, exchanging tips on growing roses. Sarah, Victoria said to my mom at the end of the evening, "You and Tom raised a remarkable daughter. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. We always knew what Tasha was capable of." Mom replied with quiet dignity, "Sometimes it just takes others a while to catch up. Life isn't perfect. I still have days when I miss the man I thought Marcus was, when I worry about JJ growing up with a long-distance father. But then I look at my son, happy and healthy, playing with his grandparents, all his grandparents, and I know we're going to be okay." Last night, I found JJ looking at an old photo of Marcus and me from our wedding day. "Do you miss Daddy?" he asked. I sat down next to him, pulling him close. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But you know what? Life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes it goes wrong before it goes right. The important thing is to stay true to who you are." Later, as I tucked him into bed, I thought about how far we'd come, from the simple accountant the Reynolds family once scorned to the woman who saved their company. Sometimes the happy ending isn't the one you expected. Sometimes it's better. From my earliest memories, I knew I was a disappointment. My parents never said it outright, but they didn't have to. Their expressions told me enough, especially after my sister Kate arrived 3 years later. I was Jenna, their firstborn daughter, and I would never quite measure up to their hopes for a son. I once overheard my mom telling my dad, "Maybe the next one will be a boy," after Kate's birth. But due to complications, there wasn't going to be a next one. Their dream of having a son faded, and they shifted their hope toward the possibility of grandsons someday. Growing up, I watched Kate charm our parents effortlessly. She had a knack for it, flashing those big brown eyes to get whatever she wanted, while I learned to rely on myself. I knew I had everything I needed: clothes, food, a roof over my head, and an education. But emotional warmth was always scarce, at least for me. I gradually accepted this, building my own sense of self-reliance. In high school, I announced over dinner, "I'm going to study economics." Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "Are you sure, honey?" Mom asked hesitantly. "What about something more suitable for a young lady, like teaching or nursing?" Despite their objections, I held firm, already having secured a partial scholarship to State University. My resolve only seemed to confirm their disappointment, and as usual, they barely hid it. Meanwhile, Kate's announcement that she wanted to study psychology was met with immediate enthusiasm. "You've always been so good with people." Mom beamed. I'd learned long ago that their approval wasn't something I'd win, so I focused on my future, looking forward to the independence college would bring. During my sophomore year, I met James, a senior in the economics department. We literally bumped into each other in the library, where he noticed me from class. "You're the one always asking the smart questions," he said, smiling as he picked up my fallen textbook. Surprised to be noticed in a positive way, I accepted his invitation for coffee. That coffee date turned into dinners, movie nights, and eventually a relationship that made me feel truly seen and appreciated. After he graduated, James landed a job at Anderson Consulting. He waited for me to finish my degree, and once I did, we moved in together. During his first visit to my parents' house, they immediately warmed up to him, doting on him and hanging on to his every word. I couldn't help but notice the stark difference in their reaction to him compared to me. They finally had the son they always wanted, if only through marriage. A year later, James proposed, and I accepted without hesitation. Despite my parents pushing for an elaborate wedding, we chose a small, intimate ceremony that felt right for us. Afterward, the questions about starting a family began almost immediately. I repeatedly explained that we wanted to save for a house first, to be financially stable. 2 years later, we bought our first home. It was modest, but it was ours. And just 3 months later, Kate announced she was pregnant. Her boyfriend Mark left as soon as she started showing, but my parents rallied around her, transforming their house into a nursery and preparing to help raise their first grandchild, Emily. My parents adored Emily, and watching them fawn over her only increased the pressure on James and me to start our own family. James was wonderful with Emily, and seeing him play with her made my heart ache with a new desire for children. We started trying, but month after month, nothing happened. After a year, my mom urged me to see a doctor, even forwarding me contacts for fertility specialists. I finally made an appointment, with James by my side. When the doctor confirmed that I was infertile, the words hit me like a blow. James was supportive, suggesting adoption or treatments, but the news weighed heavily on me. At our next family dinner, I decided to confront it head on. Taking a deep breath, I spoke up. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. I can't have children. I'm infertile. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face twisted with disgust. Infertile, she spat as though the word was poisonous. What kind of woman can't do the one thing she's meant to do? My father wouldn't even look at me. An empty vessel, he muttered. Just a barren flower. My sister Kate smirked, bouncing her daughter Emily on her knee. Guess we know who the real woman in the family is. Desperate, I looked at my husband James for support, but he just stared at his plate. Tears burned hotly in my eyes, and I pushed back from the table, running out of the house, ignoring their calls. After that night, I couldn't bring myself to go back, though James continued visiting. He'd come home full of stories. Emily learned a new song today, he'd say. You should have seen her dancing around the living room. Or, Kate made this amazing lasagna. Each word felt like a knife to my heart. Lying awake at night, listening to James breathe beside me, I wondered if he resented me. The guilt gnawed at me every time he returned from another visit to my parents' house, his eyes wistful after spending time with Emily. It was a regular Tuesday when my world fell apart. I came home early with takeout, James's favorite, but the house was empty and dark. His car wasn't in the driveway. A bad feeling twisted in my stomach, and when I called his cell, it went straight to voicemail. Then my phone buzzed, a notification from Instagram. Kate had posted a new photo. I almost ignored it but clicked anyway. My stomach dropped as the image loaded. James on my parents' couch, with Emily in his lap and Kate pressed against his side, all three grinning. The caption read, "Family time with my favorite people." My hands shook as I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house, my mind racing. The driveway was full, Mom's car, Dad's truck, and James's set-in. The front door was unlocked, and as I slipped inside, my heart pounded in my chest. Voices drifted from the living room. "James, you know we already think of you as a son," my mother was saying. "You deserve to be happy. And you've been so wonderful with Emily," my father added. "And Kate, she's young, fertile. You could have more children together. Why stay trapped in a marriage with—" Mom's voice dropped, but I still heard the disgust. "A barren woman." I couldn't breathe. I stumbled into the room, making them all jump. My parents and sister sat on the couch, James in Dad's armchair, Emily playing on the floor. One big happy family, plotting to push me out. What the hell is going on here? My voice was shaky but strong. James looked ashamed, but my parents met my gaze defiantly. Mom stood up, her chin high. "We're just having an honest discussion about what's best for everyone." "Best for everyone," I echoed, voice trembling. "You're trying to convince my husband to leave me for my sister." "Someone has to think about his future," Dad snapped. "You can't give him what he wants, what he deserves. Kate can." I turned to James, waiting for him to defend us, to say they were wrong. But he stared at the floor. "James," I whispered, my voice cracking. He finally looked up. "I'm sorry, Jenna," he said quietly. "But they're right. I want children, a family. And I've developed feelings for Kate." Kate smirked, resting her hand on James's arm. "Get out," she sneered. "You don't belong here anymore. This is my family now." I stared at each of their faces. My father's stern disapproval, my mother's cold satisfaction, Kate's triumphant smile, and James's guilty avoidance. 4 years of marriage, a lifetime of family ties shattered. Without another word, I turned and left. The divorce was quick and cold. We split everything down the middle, and I moved into a small apartment across town, throwing myself into my work, trying to forget. But social media had other plans. One morning, my coworker gasped at her phone. "Oh my God, Jenna, I'm so sorry. I forgot to unfollow your sister." She tried to hide her screen, but I'd already seen it. Kate in a massive white dress, James in a tux, my parents beaming beside them. "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. A year later, another announcement popped up. "Welcome, baby Rose." My replacement had provided the daughter they'd always wanted, giving James his perfect little family. I deleted all my social media accounts that day. Life, however, has a funny way of surprising you. I was grocery shopping one Saturday when my cart collided with someone else's. "I'm so sorry," a deep voice said. I looked up into the kindest brown eyes I'd ever seen. "I'm Michael," he introduced himself, helping me gather my items. "Can I buy you a coffee to apologize?" One coffee turned into dinner, then dating, and suddenly, I was falling in love again. This time, I was honest from the start. 6 months into our relationship, one quiet evening, I took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something." I had come to terms with the fact that I couldn't have children. I was infertile. When I told Michael, he took my hands, his eyes full of love. "Jenna, I love you. If we want kids someday, we'll adopt, or we won't. I just want you." We married in a small, intimate ceremony at the courthouse with just a few close friends. No family drama, no extravagant expectations, just love. A year into our marriage, I began feeling strange, waking up nauseous and getting dizzy at odd times. Michael insisted I see a doctor. "Mrs. Chen," the doctor said, looking at my test results, "congratulations, you're pregnant." I stared at her. "That's impossible. I'm infertile. I have the tests to prove it." She smiled kindly. "The human body is mysterious. Sometimes, despite all odds, pregnancy happens, even in cases diagnosed as infertility. It's rare, but it happens." Michael and I cried together that night, tears of joy, disbelief, and hope. I kept the news from my family. They had lost the right to share in my happiness long ago. 9 months later, I held my son, a perfect 7 pounds, 6 ounces. We named him Alexander, defender of mankind. Looking at his tiny face, I felt nothing but pure love. No bitterness, no regret, no anger. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Alexander grew, and Michael was a perfect father. We rarely ate out, savoring family dinners at home. But one evening, when Michael got a promotion, we decided to celebrate at a downtown French restaurant, Lamb's Zone. That's when I saw her, Kate, my sister, in a corner booth, wrapped in the arms of a man who was definitely not her husband. She was caressing his hair, kissing him deeply, oblivious to the world around her. My hand shook as I discreetly snapped a few photos. "Jenna," Michael said, touching my arm, "you look pale. Are you okay?" I showed him the photos. "That's Kate with someone who isn't her husband." Michael's jaw tightened. He knew our history, how Kate and her husband James had hurt me deeply. "Are you going to send those to him?" he asked gently. I hovered over the send button. One click, and I could turn their world upside down just as they'd done to mine. But I finally saved the photos to a secure folder. No, I'm better than that. A year passed, and Alexander was blossoming with Michael's kind eyes and my stubborn chin. One day, while visiting a friend in my old neighborhood, we decided to take Alexander to a nearby park. As we rounded a corner, we ran into them, my parents, Kate, and James. They saw us, and their faces turned cold as if they wanted to pretend we were strangers. But then they noticed Alexander, who was babbling about the toy truck he'd brought to the park. Mom stopped dead in her tracks. Who is this?" she asked. "This is my son, Alexander," I replied calmly. Kate let out a laugh. "Oh, please, we all know you can't have children. What agency did you adopt him from?" I held her gaze, savoring the moment. "I gave birth to him 3 years ago. No adoption agency involved." "That's impossible," Mom sputtered. "The doctors were wrong," I said evenly. "Sometimes, rare as it is, things happen." My dad's eyes filled with emotion. "A grandson? We have a grandson." They moved toward Alexander, arms outstretched, but I stepped protectively in front of him. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to claim him as your grandson. You threw me away. You lost that privilege." Kate's face turned red. She couldn't bear the shift in attention. "Get over yourself, Jenna," she snapped. "So, you managed to pop out one kid. Big deal. I still won. I have your husband, a real family, 2 beautiful daughters. Face it, you'll never be as good as me." My hand slipped to my phone. "Speaking of family, Kate, why don't you tell everyone about your friend from work?" James's face paled. "What is she talking about, Kate?" I pulled at the photos from the restaurant and held out my phone. "Here's your loving wife, dining with her friend. Most people don't kiss their friends like that." James' expression turned furious as he took the phone. My parents crowded around to see, their shock evident. "Who is he?" James demanded, his voice shaking. Kate stammered, He's just a friend." "Friends don't meet in dark corners and kiss like that," I observed coolly. "And they certainly don't have intimate dinners while their spouses are at home with the kids." The truth spilled out, and the scene devolved into chaos. Kate and James began shouting, my parents standing there in stunned silence. I took Alexander's hand. Come on, sweetheart, I said softly. Let's go home. We left them in the parking lot, their lives unraveling as my son chattered happily about the park. A month later, word reached me through the community grapevine. James had done his own tests after learning of Kate's infidelity. The results showed he was infertile, which meant Rose, the daughter Kate claimed as his, couldn't possibly be his. James left her, refusing to pay child support for either child. Kate moved back in with her parents, her life in ruins. They all tried to reach out to me, calls, emails, even showing up at our door. But I had moved on. Please, Jenna, Mom begged through the door. We made a terrible mistake. Let us be part of Alexander's life. He's our only grandson. You should have thought of that before you called me an empty vessel, I replied. Actions have consequences. Michael wrapped his arms around me later that night. Family isn't about DNA, he said softly, watching Alexander play on the floor. It's about love, respect, and loyalty. They showed you none of those things. He was right. My family was here, in this little home filled with laughter and joy, with my miracle son and my husband who loved me, whether I could have children or not. I had everything I needed. Sometimes, the family you're born into is the family you're meant to have. Sometimes, you have to build your own, with people who choose you back. I chose Michael, and he chose me. We chose Alexander, and he chose us back with every smile, every word, and every step. That's what real family is. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. My life took an unexpected and delightful turn the day I met James. Before him, my world had been consumed by the never-ending cycle of corporate crisis. But stepping into James's life was like entering a world of sweetness, quite literally, at his family-owned candy shop, Sweet Sanctuary. Here, love and confections blended effortlessly, and I soon found myself managing the finances of this charming little store. Good morning, love, James would greet me, his smile lighting up the room as I stepped into the deliciously fragrant shop. Even on days when tension lingered in the air, his warmth was a constant reminder of the new joy in my life. Morning, I'd reply, sorting through the usual stack of bills, a task I had become quite adept at handling. Sales are up this month. That new chocolate line is really taking off. James would give a nonchalant shrug, though I could sense the subtle pressure behind his casual demeanor. Yeah, well, that's all you, he'd joke. Mom still sees me as the candy guy. I laughed along, though I could tell there was more beneath the surface. Just as we were settling into the rhythm of our morning, his mother, Patricia, would burst through the door, all smiles and enthusiasm. James, my boy, you outdone yourself. The store looks fabulous, she'd exclaim, giving him an overzealous pat on the back. Her gaze would then shift to me, and her smile would tighten just slightly. Karen, still playing shopkeeper, I see. I'd offer a polite sigh and respond, Good morning, Patricia. Yes, playing shopkeeper is what keeps us in the black. Patricia would wave my comment away dismissively. Numbers, Karen. You should leave that to the accountants and help my son with the real business. Before I could respond, James would step in, his tone firm yet gentle. Mom, Karen's doing more than fine. We're doing great because she's got a business head, he'd say, wrapping an arm around me in a silent but supportive gesture. Patricia, however, wasn't easily deterred. Well, as long as my boy is happy, I suppose that's what matters, she'd muttered before flouncing off, her presence lingering long after she'd gone. James would squeeze my side apologetically. Don't let her get to you, he'd murmur. I'd smile weakly, doing my best to push aside the unease. I'm not, let's just focus on the shop. And so we did, pouring our hearts into making Sweet Sanctuary not just a candy store, but a slice of paradise. That sense of bliss lasted for a while, until I began noticing troubling signs. Deliveries started coming in, not with ingredients for our confections, but with expensive gadgets bearing eye-popping price tags. One evening, as I locked at the register and eyed a sleek new phone still in its packaging, I couldn't help but ask, Another package, James? That's the new phone I ordered, he replied, his excitement palpable as he ripped open the box. Top of the line. I raised an eyebrow, concerned. Don't we have other priorities? The mixer in the back's been making a strange noise. James brushed off my worries, his attention fixed on the phone. It's fine, Karen. We've got to treat ourselves, too. You know. Part of me wanted to protest to remind him of our precarious financial situation, but I held back, hoping we could find a balance between indulgence and keeping our dream alive. Still, it wasn't just the phone that bothered me. Patricia, ever the showwoman, regularly flaunted her extravagant purchases, turning Sweet Sanctuary into her personal runway. "Karen, look at this dress," she'd exclaim, twirling in an expensive floral number that was easily worth more than a day's earnings. "Isn't it just darling?" "It's nice," I'd reply, keeping my tone even. "But shouldn't we be saving for that sign outside?" Patricia would dismiss me with a wave, her tone dripping with indifference. "Nonsense. The store is doing wonderfully. James, tell her." James, distracted, would nod absently. "Yeah, we're doing great, Karen. Don't worry so much." But that was exactly my issue. I worried. Every time I checked the financials, the numbers told a different story, one of dwindling profits being eaten up by unnecessary expenses. "We need to be careful," I suggested again that week after reviewing the books. James gave me a look like I'd just suggested selling the store for a one-way ticket to the circus. "Come on, Karen. It's not that bad. You're being stingy," he said, the word stinging more than I wanted to admit. "I'm not being stingy, James. I'm being smart. We need to think about the future of Sweet Sanctuary," I argued. But he seemed uninterested, already absorbed in browsing another site for his next purchase. "You worry too much," he dismissed, barely paying attention. "It'll all work out." Things escalated when Patricia decided we needed extra help. It was a Tuesday, inventory day, and I was organizing a shipment of candy jars when she walked in, arm in arm with a young woman who could not have been more than 20. "Karen, this is Lisa," Patricia announced with a flourish. "She's going to help us with the business side of things." I straightened up, wiping my hands on my apron. "Nice to meet you, Lisa. But just to clarify, I'm the co-manager here," I said, my voice friendly but firm. Lisa's smile was polite but distant. "I've heard a lot about you. I'm excited to be part of the team." Patricia's smug expression told me all I needed to know. She hadn't consulted James about this hire. "What exactly will Lisa be assisting with?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Oh, she's going to help with the business side of things. You can only do so much after all," Patricia replied dismissively, her gaze skimming over my inventory sheets. It was then that I knew, for better or worse, the future of Sweet Sanctuary was no longer solely in our hands. I nodded, though a mix of confusion and concern stirred inside me. "All right, well, we have a system here, so I'll need to bring her up to speed." It quickly became clear that Lisa's idea of helping was more about observing than actively participating. When I discovered the salary Patricia had approved for her, I was taken aback. "James, can we talk?" I asked him later in the office. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, not even glancing up from his computer. "It's about Lisa. Her salary, it's more than we can afford for her role," I explained. James finally looked up, his expression troubled. "Mom said it was fine. She thinks Lisa will bring a lot to the table." I sighed, feeling as though I was speaking to a wall. The challenges at Sweet Sanctuary were escalating, and it was becoming harder to keep our sweet dream from soaring. Despite our agreement to discuss new hires together, especially regarding their salaries, James shrugged it off, as though it were insignificant. "What's done is done. Mom has a good feeling about her," he remarked dismissively. Frustrated, I held back my response. Relying on good feelings wasn't going to balance our books. I left his office, feeling like I was the only one aware of the red flags while James and his mother paraded through the business blindfolded. I'd always been meticulous, double-checking, sometimes triple-checking, especially when it came to numbers. So when I found an envelope tucked away in the back of a filing cabinet while searching for a misplaced invoice, I opened it, assuming it was just another overlooked bill. But my heart sank when I saw what was inside. A document listing Sweet Sanctuary as collateral for a loan, the amount far beyond what our humble shop could justify. "James," I called, entering his cluttered office with the papers in hand. He looked up, and for the first time in months, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "What's this?" I demanded. "Oh, that's nothing. Just a small loan I took out for store improvements," he replied casually. "Store improvements?" I repeated, incredulous. "This amount could renovate the store 9 times over. What did you really use it for?" There was a long, tense pause. Finally, he spoke, carefully choosing his words. "Look, I might have used some of it for the house. The one I've been fixing up for us." For us, I repeated, my voice sharp with disbelief. Or for your gadgets and whatever else you've been wasting money on. James stood up, his chair scraping back with the force of a judge's gavel. Yet all I felt was rising frustration. It's not like that, Karen. You don't understand. This is all going to pay off in the end. No, James, I said, shaking my head. Taking out a loan against the store without telling me. That's what I don't understand. How could you be so reckless? Before he could answer, Patricia stormed in, noticing the documents in my hand. What's all this? She demanded. James started to explain, but I cut him off, shoving the loan papers toward her. Did you know about this? I asked. Patricia barely glanced at the documents, dismissing them with a wave of her hand. Of course I did. James is just doing what's necessary for our future. And who are you to question him? You're just the help, after all. Her words stung, but they also ignited something in me. Just the help, I replied, my voice steady and firm. I've been keeping the store afloat while you two have been treating it like your personal bank account. James's face turned pale, and Patricia looked ready to erupt. You ungrateful little, she began, but I cut her off, surprisingly calm. What's ungrateful is not recognizing the hard work someone's putting into this business. What's foolish is risking everything for a house we don't even need. They were speechless, caught in their own lies and misdeeds. I left the room, the loan papers clutched in my hand like a pending judgment. Later that day, the kitchen table, usually reserved for casual meals, became the setting for a somber discussion. A council of war rather than a chat about a candy shop. James cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. We need to talk about the store's future, he said. I sat down, folding my hands on the table, ready to confront the issues we had long ignored. As I sat there, facing the harsh reality of our situation, Patricia's demeanor grew stern. We need to be realistic, Karen. The store isn't making enough to cover the debts. We have to find money somewhere. The way she said "we" made my alarm bells ring. It sounded like she was implying the responsibility fell on me. What do you suggest? I asked, keeping my composure. Her eyes flickered with a calculating coldness. You have that inheritance from your parents. It could clear the debts and stabilize the store. I was taken aback, feeling like I was talking to a stranger, not the mother of the man I married. You want me to use my parents' money, the money meant for my personal security? I asked, my voice incredulous. James quickly jumped in. It's not like you're doing anything else with it, he said. And what about our security? Patricia cut in sharply, her tone implying my inheritance should be treated as a family resource. I looked between them, my heart sinking. I'm part of this family, but it feels like you only recognize that when you need something from me. James shifted uneasily. It's not like that, Karen, but we're struggling here. I stood, my voice steady but disbelieving. So you expect me to just hand over my future? Patricia leaned in, pressing her point. If you care about this family, yes? I thought about the long hours and sleepless nights I'd spent trying to keep the shop afloat. If I do this. The words felt heavier than I expected. If I use my inheritance, I want 1/3 of the store. I want to be an official co-owner. The room went silent, then Patricia's laugh rang out, dismissive and cruel. You, a co-owner? Don't be ridiculous. You're not business material. I stood up, the sound of my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Then find another way to cover your debts, because my inheritance is not your emergency fund. James' face was unreadable, but Patricia's flushed with anger. You let this family business fail. I've tried to save it, I said quietly but resolutely. But I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. That night, an unsettling feeling drew me back to Sweet Sanctuary. The shop was dark, as expected, but a faint light from the back office suggested otherwise. I pushed the door open, the usual comforting chime of the bell now feeling almost ominous. The sweet scent of candy, once soothing, now felt thick with deceit. As I neared the back, I heard murmurs from the office. I pushed the door fully open and saw James with his arms around Lisa, the new hire. She giggled at something he whispered. I stood frozen for a moment, then pushed the door open further. Their faces morphed from shock to guilt as they quickly sprang apart. Karen, James stammered, straightening his shirt. It's not what it looks like. Really? I replied, my voice cold. Because it looks like I just caught my husband with his arms around another woman. Lisa fumbled with her hair, avoiding my gaze. We were just going over inventory, she said, her voice barely a whisper. At midnight, with the inventory in your arms. I raised an eyebrow. Really? James looked desperate. Karen, please, you're blowing this out of proportion. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Am I? A calm settled over me, chilling in its clarity. The trust and partnership I thought we had were gone. Everything was unmistakably clear. James stepped toward me, but I raised a hand to stop him. Save it, James. I don't know what's worse, your cheating or the feeble lies. Lisa found her voice, faint and apologetic. I'm sorry, Karen. I never wanted any of this to happen. I studied her, young, naive, tangled in the web of a man unable to own up to his mistakes. You should be sorry, I said, and turned to James. And you, James, should start job hunting. He objected immediately. You can't fire her over this. I was unyielding. I can and I will. Tomorrow, I'll be contacting a lawyer. James went pale. Karen, please, let's discuss this. There's nothing left to discuss, I interrupted sharply. You've made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Without waiting for his reply, I walked out, my head held high as his pleas faded behind me. The following morning, bright sunlight contrasted sharply with the gloom of our household. Having spent the night at my rental property, I sat at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. It was a message from James. Tempted to ignore it, I gave in to curiosity. It was a photo of a bank letter demanding immediate repayment. Below it, James had typed, "We need to talk. This is serious." I sighed, prepared for whatever awaited me. On my way. When I arrived at the shop, James and Patricia were already there, pacing nervously. Patricia noticed me first, her expression darkening. Decided to show up, did you? She snapped. I nodded, meeting her glare. You wanted to talk. James handed me the letter, his face lined with anxiety. The bank's on us hard. We could lose everything. I scanned the letter, unsurprised by the figures, but uneasy nonetheless. So what's your plan? Patricia shot me a glare. We wouldn't be in this mess if you just helped when we asked. Ignoring her, I turned to James. What are you going to do? He looked defeated, running a hand through his hair. I thought maybe you could cover it with your inheritance. I gave a bitter laugh. I told you, I'm not footing this bill without a stake in the business. Patricia stepped forward, a scowl on her face. You're being unreasonable, Karen. This is a family business. I met her challenge with forced calm. And where was this family when your son was mismanaging our funds and hiring his buddies for kicks? James opened his mouth to speak, then faltered, looking down. You don't get to play the family card only when it's convenient, I said. We'll need to figure something else out. James muttered, You'll have to then. Unexpectedly, Patricia smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. Fine, but if you're not helping, then you're out. We'll manage without you. You're fired. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence linger before matching her smile. Okay. Their astonishment was almost amusing. Just like that, James asked, incredulous. Just like that, I confirmed. I need you to understand. I've meticulously gathered evidence. I took photographs of your dealings with Lisa and kept a detailed log of every dime squandered. If you think you can dismiss me and bury this mess, you're sorely mistaken. Patricia's smile faltered, and she hissed, You wouldn't dare. Oh, but I would, I said. And as I leave, I'll take my hard-earned achievements with me. Let's see how you'll explain to the bank why the business is floundering without its real pillar. Months had passed since I last walked through the doors of Sweet Sanctuary. My life had found a new rhythm, paper rustling, the quiet hum of productivity, resolving challenges. I sat in my crisp new office, a world away from the chaotic storeroom of the confectionery. My phone rang, and Angela's name lit up the caller ID. She was the only connection I'd kept from that chapter of my life. Hey, Angela, what's new? I greeted her, a tinge of apprehension in my voice. I knew Sweet Sanctuary updates always stirred old memories. Haven't you heard? Angela's voice was mixed with pity and discomfort. The shop shut down last week. The bank foreclosed on it, and their house. A sense of unexpected relief washed over me. How are James and his mother coping? There was a brief pause. Not well, I'm afraid. They've moved in with his aunt. They're keeping a low profile. Thanks for letting me know, Angela. The news settled in, but then Angela added, Karen, everyone knew you were the lifeblood of that place. It just wasn't the same after you left. A small, sad smile touched my lips. Thanks for saying so. How about you? Have you found something new? Yes, I'm at a bakery downtown now. It's no Sweet Sanctuary, but it's a start. That's great to hear, Angela. You've always had a knack for baking. I'm sure you'll do well. We exchanged a few more words before ending the call. As I looked out the window at the bustling street below, my assistant knocked on my door. Your 4 o'clock appointment is here, she announced. Thanks, send them in, I replied, ready to shake off the last traces of nostalgia. A couple walked in, worry etched on their faces about their enterprise. As I stood to greet them, I felt energized by the new challenge. We've heard excellent things about you, Karen, the wife said as they took their seats. They say you're the top crisis manager around. I smiled, at ease with the recognition. I'll strive to live up to that. Now, tell me about your business, and let's explore how we can steer things back on track. As they detailed their issues, my mind buzzed with strategies. This was my domain now, where every problem had a remedy, and each challenge was a doorway to opportunity. Sweet Sanctuary, with its bittersweet recollections, lay behind me. Ahead was a path I had crafted for myself, one of resilience, redemption, and new beginnings. As our conversation continued, their anxiety transformed into hopeful smiles. They departed with renewed vigor, and I turned back to my desk, my spirit lighter than it had been in ages. The most rewarding victories often come after the toughest trials. The future was mine to shape, one deliberate step at a time. My name is Sandra, and I'm the mother of an 18-year-old college student named Michael. For years, my husband Brian and I have made countless sacrifices to support his education, giving up holidays and tightening our belts in every possible way to secure his future. We live in a cozy, modest home that once belonged to my grandmother before she moved to a nursing home. Brian works at a local hardware store, and I manage the front desk at a doctor's office. Our life is simple, but we're happy with it. It was a typical Thursday afternoon, and I was preparing dinner when Brian's phone rang. His worried "Hello, Mom, slow down, what's wrong?" made me pause. He began pacing, his face pale and tense. When he finally hung up, he sank onto the couch, looking defeated. "It's my parents," he said quietly. "Their business went under. They're bankrupt and lost everything, even their house." My heart sank. "Oh, Brian, that's terrible. What will they do?" He sighed, his worry evident. "They're asking if they can stay with us, just until they figure things out." I hesitated, thinking of our already tight budget and how settled our life was. "And what did you say?" "I told them I'd talk to you first," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "This is your house too, Sandra. I didn't want to decide without you." Brian's parents, Terry and Catherine, were far from easygoing. They were used to luxury, and I knew our simple home would be quite a shock for them. "You know how they are," I said gently. "This house, it's not exactly their style." "I know," Brian replied, looking torn. "But they're my parents, and they're really in a bind." I thought about it, remembering the times they'd visited and barely concealed their disdain for a modest setup. But knowing they were desperate enough to ask for help softened me. "All right, they can stay, but just temporarily, until they get back on their feet." Brian nodded gratefully and called his mother back. "Mom, Sandra and I talked it over. You can stay with us for a bit, but you'll need to start looking for your own place soon." I couldn't hear a response, but the firmness in Brian's voice. Eyes, Mom, were clear. Said it all. The following week, they arrived. I stood on the porch, my stomach sinking as two massive moving trucks rolled up. Brian managed a forced smile, directing the movers. Terry was the first to greet him, slapping him on the back like he'd hit the jackpot. Catherine swept over to me, her perfume overwhelming as she kissed my cheek. "You're an angel for letting us stay," she said sweetly. I smiled, glancing nervously at the mountains of furniture and boxes now overflowing onto our front lawn. "Is this all just the essentials?" I muttered under my breath, trying to stay polite. "Oh yes," Catherine replied airily. "Just the basics, of course." Brian and I shared a worried glance as the movers began lugging in armchairs, boxes, and even a towering grandfather clock. It quickly became clear that the essentials were far from minimal. Every inch of our modest living room was being overtaken by their belongings, which seemed to multiply as each box was carried in. I pulled Brian aside as the movers took a break. "This is too much," I whispered. "They've brought enough to fill an entire house. Where are we supposed to put all of this?" He rubbed his temples, looking weary. "I know, Sandra. I'll talk to them. Let's just get through today." By the time everything was inside, our cozy home looked like a storage unit. Dinner felt cramped, with boxes stacked around us. Terry and Catherine seemed oblivious to the mess, laughing and chatting as Terry poured a glass of expensive wine. Sandra, you have to try this, he insisted, swirling the wine like we were at a high-end tasting. Brian cleared his throat, trying to set some boundaries. We'll need to go over some ground rules, he started gently. Space is tight and… Oh, don't worry about it, son. Terry cut him off, waving a hand dismissively. We'll make it work, won't we, Catherine? I forced a smile as they carried on, looking around at the piles of boxes and ornate decorations that had taken over our simple space. This was going to be a long stay. Life with Terry and Catherine was proving more challenging than I had imagined. A few days after they'd settled in, another strain surfaced. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was preparing a simple spaghetti dinner when Catherine strolled into the kitchen, her nose wrinkling in obvious distaste. "What's that smell?" she asked, her tone laced with disapproval. "It's dinner," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "Spaghetti. Where's the meat? The fresh herbs," she scoffed, peering over my shoulder as if the simmering sauce was somehow offensive. Hearing her tone, Brian stepped in, drying his hands on a dish towel. "What's wrong?" "The problem, Brian, is that we're expected to eat this." Catherine gestured toward the pot with disdain. Taking a steadying breath, I explained, "This is what we usually have. We can't afford steaks and gourmet meals every night." Brian's expression hardened, and he turned to his mother, his voice firm. "Mom, this is Sandra's home too. If you prefer something else, you're welcome to cook it yourself." Catherine's eyes narrowed as she retorted sharply, "Oh, we will. And we expect you to provide the groceries we need. We're not used to living like this." I felt my patience fray. "I understand that you're used to different standards, but this is what we can afford. Our budget doesn't cover luxuries." Terry, who had been quiet until now, interjected loudly, "Then perhaps you should reconsider your budget. We're not animals to live off scraps." Brian's jaw clenched. "Dad, that's enough. We're doing the best we can." Catherine huffed. "Fine. Tomorrow we'll give you a list of what we want to eat. Make sure it's here." The next day, true to her word, Catherine handed me a list filled with items like marbled beef, fresh seafood, and imported organic products. As I looked it over, my heart sank. That evening, we all sat down, the list sprawled out on the kitchen table. Terry declared, "We expect proper meals, like steak or fresh fish." Brian and I exchanged a look of disbelief. "We can't afford that," he said, his voice firm but weary. "It's just not in our budget." Their response was swift and cutting. "Lazy, both of you," Catherine snapped. "Can't even provide a decent meal." Feeling cornered, I reluctantly gave in. I began purchasing only the finest ingredients for their meals, while Brian and I resorted to cheaper fast food to save costs. A month later, the strain in our finances and patience was beginning to show. After reviewing our expenses, I was stunned to see our food budget had doubled. Catherine's long, luxurious baths had sent the water bill soaring as well. Dinner had turned into a nightly battleground, but tonight felt like the breaking point. As Terry and Catherine enjoyed their plates of marbled steak and imported fish, Brian and I sat opposite them with simple pasta, the only meal we could afford. The difference on our plates was stark, highlighting an ever-deepening divide. Unable to hold back any longer, I finally spoke. "This has to stop. We can't keep living like this, eating different meals. From now on, everyone in this house will eat the same food, and it'll be within our budget." Terry laughed dismissively, a grating sound that tested my patience. "You expect us to eat that slop?" "It's not slop, it's dinner. What we eat," I shot back, my voice tinged with frustration. The laughter vanished from Terry's face, replaced by a scowl. Catherine's tone turned sharp. "How can you be so greedy and lazy? Cooking a decent meal isn't that hard." Both of them looked at Brian expectantly, as if waiting for him to side with them. That was it for Brian. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the plates rattle. "First off, this is Sandra's house as much as mine, and you will treat her with respect," he said, his voice resonant and firm. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "I never thought I'd see the day when you, my son, would shout at me like this." Terry's frustration boiled over as he jabbed his finger toward Brian. "Look at you, completely whipped and following her every command. Is this really who you've become?" I kept my composure, though my heart was pounding. "Enough. This conversation is over. From now on, no more lavish spending on steaks or seafood. We all eat the same simple meals." A frosty silence fell over the room as Terry and Catherine pushed their chairs back and left the table without another word. Brian and I remained, surrounded by the heavy quiet. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said softly. I nodded, feeling the weight of the evening settle on us. "Me too, but it's the right choice. We can't keep living like this." After that night, the atmosphere at home grew quieter, but the tension simmered beneath the surface. Terry and Catherine's silence carried a hint of defiance, as though they were biding their time. A few days later, as I was cleaning up from a simple lunch of sandwiches, the doorbell rang. Expecting a delivery or perhaps a neighbor, I went to the door, only to be met by a delivery man holding a large, fragrant bag from an upscale local restaurant. "Delivery for Sandra?" he asked, glancing at his clipboard. I stared, confused. There must be a mistake. I didn't order this. Just then, Catherine appeared beside me with an overly bright smile. "Oh, I decided to treat us to a nice meal. We deserve a little comfort after all the tension." I hesitated, holding the bag. "Catherine, we discussed this. We're cutting back on expenses." She avoided my gaze, giving a dismissive shrug. "Well, I thought a little treat wouldn't hurt." "I thought it was on your tab, dear." "My mistake," Catherine said lightly. Brian entered from the kitchen, catching the end of our conversation. "What's going on?" he asked. "Your mother thought we deserved an expensive lunch," I replied, the weight of the bag in my hands suddenly feeling heavier. Brian's expression darkened. "Mom, we agreed. No more of this." From the hallway, Terry's voice boomed. "What harm is a little lunch going to do? You can't expect us to live like hermits forever." I placed the bag on the counter, frustration rising. "It's not just about this lunch. It's every unnecessary expense. We've already said we're sticking to a budget." Catherine's demeanor turned icy. "If you're going to fuss over a simple meal, perhaps we won't bother next time." Brian pinched the bridge of his nose, exasperated. "It's not just about the meal. It's about respecting the household rules. You can't keep undermining us." The argument circled on until at last Terry and Catherine retreated to their room, leaving the untouched, costly lunch on the table. Brian and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that this had gone too far. "I'll call the restaurant, explain the situation, and cancel any future orders made without our approval," I said, picking up the phone. Brian nodded, his resolve firm. "I'll talk to them again. This sneaky behavior has to stop." Peace was fleeting. After the unauthorized lunch, Catherine and Terry simmered with barely concealed resentment, and the tension was thick enough to cut. Then, one evening, as I was washing dishes, the calm shattered once more. Brian had just come in from the yard, looking worn, and I was about to ask about his day when a sudden crash from the living room had us both sprinting to investigate. We found Terry looming over a shattered vase, one of the few heirlooms I deeply valued. "What just happened?" Brian asked, his voice measured despite the scene. "It just slipped out of my hand," Terry replied, his tone devoid of apology and edged with defiance. As Brian crouched to gather the broken pieces, I couldn't hold back. "That vase was an heirloom from my grandmother. It has more history with this house than any of us." Catherine, leaning in the doorway, dismissed it with a shrug. "It's just a vase. You can always find another." "That's not the point, Catherine," I shot back, anger rising. "This is about respect, something that's clearly lacking here." Terry raised his voice, his frustration boiling over. "Respect? How about the way you treat us like second-rate residents in our own home?" Brian rose to his feet, facing his father directly. "You're here because we allow it, Dad. Don't forget that." "It doesn't feel like we're allowed anything," Catherine snapped, her tone sharp. "It feels like we're just tolerated." Living with Terry and Catherine was like navigating a minefield, but one particular evening pushed me to my limit. We were sitting at the dinner table, the scene of countless past disputes, when Catherine dropped an astonishing new request. "Brian, I saw a lovely coat today, and I think we should use Michael's college fund to buy it," she said, as casually as if she were suggesting a change in coffee brands. I choked on my drink, setting my glass down forcefully. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" With a sweet smile, Catherine mistook my shock for agreement. "It's only money, dear. Michael can take out loans for college, and I do need a new coat." Brian, who had been silently fuming, slammed his fork down. "Mom, that's not happening. That fund is for our son's future, not for your shopping spree." Catherine's expression soured. "How can you deny your mother such a simple thing?" It's not simple, and we're not discussing this further, Brian said firmly, bringing the matter to an unmistakable close. My last shred of patience finally broke. Enough, I said firmly, standing up. Terry's voice rose, echoing through the room. You're being unreasonable and cruel. We're your family. His tone turned cold as he added, maybe the local news would like to know how you treat your parents. Imagine what your employers might think. Anger and unease churned within me, but I felt my resolve solidify. This isn't how a family behaves, I replied. You both need to find somewhere else to live. This arrangement isn't working. Catherine started crying, casting herself as the victim, while Terry continued with accusations and thinly veiled threats. The argument ended with them storming off, leaving Brian and me in a heavy silence. Later, after the house had quieted down, I retreated to her bedroom and called my grandmother. She picked up after a few rings, her familiar voice a balm for my nerves. Grandma, it's Sandra, I began, my voice thick with emotion. What's wrong, my dear? She asked, instantly concerned. I told her everything. The constant demands, the threats, and how unbearable life with Catherine and Terry had become. She listened patiently, occasionally murmuring softly, until I finished. I'll come and stay with you for a few months, she decided without hesitation. Are you sure, Grandma? What about the nursing home? I asked. I'm sure, she replied. Sounds like you need me right now. Her arrival brought a much-needed breath of fresh air to her tense home. Although age had slowed her, Grandma's spirit was as resilient as ever. Terry and Catherine's discomfort was obvious, their unease practically palpable. I'll be staying on the ground floor, Grandma announced as she entered, her suitcase trailing behind. We might need to rearrange a few things. Terry barely concealed his irritation behind a forced smile. Of course, we'll make sure you're comfortable, right? He said, glancing at Catherine, who nodded stiffly. Grateful for her support, I finally felt like someone was here to set things right. After the movers adjusted the space to accommodate her, Grandma wasted no time in calling a family meeting. I've heard enough from Sandra about these issues, and I'm not pleased, she began, her tone sharp and direct. Terry started to object, but Grandma silenced him with a raised hand. I'm not finished. Technically, this house is still under my name. I allowed Sandra and Brian to stay here rent-free, but that doesn't extend to you too. Catherine's face went pale. You want us to pay rent? She stammered. Yes, I do. $5,500 a month, Grandma replied evenly. That's outrageous, Terry protested, rising to his feet. Grandma's gaze didn't waver. Considering the expenses you've run up, you could manage it by cutting a few luxuries. Her voice softened slightly, but her words held firm authority. If rent is too steep, you're welcome to find another place to live. Or if you stay, you'll help me daily, moving around, preparing meals, and making sure I take my medications. Catherine's defiant demeanor crumbled. She looked stunned, while Terry seemed caught off guard. Think it over, Grandma concluded, her tone leaving no room for argument. I expect your decision by tomorrow morning. The next day, I walked into the kitchen to find Terry and Catherine packing, boxes piled by the door. Terry glanced up briefly, saying, We've decided to move out. We found a small apartment. It's for the best, Catherine murmured, barely looking at me. The rest of the morning passed in a blur as they packed and moved out. Brian helped out of obligation more than anything else, and soon, our home was finally peaceful again. By mid-afternoon, the rooms they had occupied were silent, the echoes of their departure leaving a lingering sense of relief. Grandma, watching quietly, gave me a knowing smile. Well, that's that, she said with finality. They'll be fine. Sometimes a little hardship is necessary to bring people back down to earth. We later heard that they'd sold most of their possessions to cover their new expenses. Their once lavish lifestyle had been reduced to the basics in a modest apartment. Grandma stayed for another 3 weeks, her presence a comforting anchor. When it was time for her to return to the nursing home, I felt both sadness and gratitude. Thank you for everything, Grandma. I don't know what we would have done without you. She waved me off with a smile. Oh, nonsense. You're stronger than you think. Just remember to stand up for yourselves. No one else will do it for you. Her words filled me with confidence. As I drove back home, the house felt more spacious and calm than it had in ages. That evening, Brian and I sat together on the porch, letting the gentle evening breeze soothe us. Life had thrown its challenges our way, but we'd faced them as a team and come out stronger. And we were ready, whatever the future held. My name is Diana, and there was a time when I believed my life was perfectly in order. I had a successful career as head of marketing, a loving husband named Bob, and a stable, comfortable existence. I was proud to be financially independent, diligently paying off our mortgage with my earnings. Family was central to us. Bob's younger brother, Nathan, and their mother, Judy, were constants in our lives. Their father had passed away some years earlier, making the brothers especially protective of their mom. Watching Bob's devotion to his family only deepened my affection for him. At first, Judy seemed genuinely fond of me. During family gatherings, we chat over coffee, and she often asked about my job in marketing. She'd nod with what seemed like genuine respect as she commented on the importance of my work. I cherished her approval, wanting to be a beloved part of Bob's close family circle. In those early years, our marriage was full of joyful family activities. Weekend barbecues, holiday feasts, and spontaneous game nights. I remember one particularly lively Thanksgiving at Judy's house, with laughter filling the air and conversations overlapping. "Pass the gravy, will you?" Bob's uncle would jovially call, and Judy would playfully retort, smiling as she passed the gravy boat. Surrounded by Bob's family, I felt a genuine sense of belonging. But an unsettling undercurrent surfaced during a New Year's Eve gathering at Judy's. While refilling my wine in the kitchen, I overheard her in the living room making a snide remark about what Bob's cousin Lori was wearing. Lori, a single mother, was struggling financially, and Judy's words were cutting. "That dress must have cost all of $10, she scoffed, implying Lori was out of her depth among those more financially secure. My heart sank with embarrassment for Lori. This wasn't the warm, welcoming family I thought I knew. Over time, the teasing that I'd brushed off as harmless revealed itself as something far crueler. Judy regularly huddled with Bob and Nathan, casting judgmental glances at other relatives and friends, whispering and snickering as they shared derisive comments. I felt the sting of this cruelty on Easter Sunday when Judy mocked another relative's new car. "Probably got it from the buy here, pay here lot," she speculated with a smirk. "She'll be paying it off until she's 70. I couldn't hold back. "Hey," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't you think that's a bit much? Janet can probably hear you." The room went silent as Judy looked up at me with thinly veiled disdain. "Well," she replied sarcastically, "looks like we've offended your delicate sensibilities, Diana." Bob and Nathan exchanged uneasy glances. "I just think it's rude," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Why do you always have to put people down?" Judy's smile faded. "If you don't like it, you don't have to listen. Why don't you go sit somewhere else?" Feeling slapped, I turned to Bob, hoping for his support, but he only looked down. "Fine," I said tightly. "I will." After that day, family gatherings became a lonely ordeal. I'd sit by myself, nursing a drink, while Bob stayed glued to his mother's side. Occasionally, he'd send an apologetic glance my way, but he never came to sit with me. One evening, after an especially tense dinner, I felt the weight of this divide settle heavily between us. I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Why don't you ever stand up to her?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger. Bob sighed deeply, his hand running through his hair in distress. "She's my mother, Diana. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to tell her she's being mean," I said, my words sharp. "I want you to support me." But he never did. Over time, the tension grew unbearable. I started finding excuses to avoid family events, work emergencies, migraines, anything to escape the icy stares and whispered criticisms. Just when I thought things couldn't get more strained, life threw me a curveball. I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the pregnancy test, two pink lines glaring back at me. My heart pounded in my chest as I called for Bob, my voice trembling. He rushed to the bathroom door, worry written all over his face. Without a word, I handed him the test. His eyes widened in surprise, and he pulled me into an embrace. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe this baby could heal the rift between us. Maybe this new life would bring us closer, restore what we were losing. But the pregnancy was difficult from the start. I was plagued by constant nausea and a constant gnawing fear of miscarriage. My doctor prescribed bed rest, but as the weeks went on, my condition worsened. My eyesight began to deteriorate, another rare, potentially permanent complication. It soon became impossible for me to keep working. I had to quit my job. As I lay there, physically and emotionally drained, I felt more isolated than ever. I needed Bob's support, but he seemed to pull further away. He came home late most nights, claiming work demands or meetings with colleagues. More and more, I fell asleep alone, only waking to the sound of the front door closing late into the night. The day of my C-section arrived, and with my deteriorating eyesight, a natural birth was too risky. As I lay on the cold operating table, fear and excitement mingled in my chest. "Where's Bob?" I'd asked the nurse, my voice shaking. She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Your husband's in the waiting room, dear. He said he'd rather stay there." The surgery went smoothly, and soon, the sound of my son's first cry filled the room. As they placed him on my chest, an overwhelming rush of love took my breath away. But the moment of joy was short-lived. Later, in the recovery room, Bob finally appeared. His face was unreadable, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. "Look, Diana," he said, his tone sharp, "I've got to say something. This whole thing, it's not right." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" His frustration was palpable. Normal women give birth on their own without all this surgery crap. And men, we're not supposed to be here for this. We should be meeting our wives and kids at home, like in the old days. His words hit me like a physical blow. My heart sank as I processed his utter lack of empathy. Bob, the man I thought I knew, seemed so distant, so disconnected from the reality of what we had just gone through. I couldn't hold back any longer, but before I could speak, he cut me off. "Save it. I'm heading home. This place gives me the creeps." The next few weeks blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and endless feedings, with Bob rarely at home. When he was there, he barely helped with the baby. His presence seemed like a shadow, and when he did interact with our son, it was with frustration. One night, as the baby cried, Bob grumbled irritably, "Can't you quiet him down?" I was exhausted, my body still recovering from surgery, but I managed to respond, "I'm trying, Bob. He's teething. It's painful for him." Bob's patience was running thin. "You're always focused on the kid. What about me? What about what I need?" His words hit me like a slap. Here I was barely managing to get any sleep, still healing, trying to juggle everything. And he was upset because our intimacy had dwindled. I didn't know how to respond. As the months went by, Bob's dissatisfaction only deepened. One night, while I rocked our restless 7-month-old, Bob made an abrupt declaration. "You need to start working again." I looked at him stunned. "What about the baby?" "We'll get a nanny," he interrupted. "We can't keep going like this, Diana. We're running out of money." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that our baby needed me, that I wasn't ready to leave him yet, but the finality in Bob's voice left no room for discussion. Reluctantly, I began searching for a job. With my vision still impaired, it was a daunting task, but eventually I found a role at a smaller firm. The salary was much lower than my previous job, but it was something. When I shared the news with Bob, his response was dismissive. "That's all we're paying a nanny for." His frustration was palpable. Tears pricked at my eyes. "I'm doing the best I can, Bob. It's hard with my vision still not fully recovered." He muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. And so began a grueling new chapter. Mornings were a rush to get to work, and every day I felt a pang of guilt as I handed my son over to the nanny. My days were a blur of trying to keep up at work with compromised eyesight, then coming home to a husband who resented me and a child who needed me more than ever. Time slipped by in a relentless cycle of work, childcare, and mounting tension. Family gatherings, already strained, grew worse with Judy's behavior. She'd act as the doting grandmother when others were around, but her detachment was always clear. She'd call our son in a sickly sweet tone, "Come to Grandma." But he, sensing her coldness, would cling to me instead. Judy's mood would sour instantly. "What have you been telling him about me?" she'd accuse, venom in her voice. "You're turning my grandson against me." Exhausted, I tried to explain. "He just doesn't know you well, Judy. Maybe if you visited more." She'd cut me off before I could finish. "Don't you dare blame this on me," she'd snap, then storm off to complain to Bob. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, my life took another unexpected turn. I found myself staring at a positive pregnancy test, the 2 lines unmistakable. Panic gripped me as memories of my first difficult pregnancy flooded back. Was I strong enough to go through this again? I realized I was already well into my first trimester, and the path ahead seemed set. Trembling, I called Bob at work to break the news. His voice was impatient. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," I said, my heart racing. After a long silence, Bob finally replied, "Look, Diana, I'm swamped. We'll talk later. Just keep your job. We can afford to lose that income. Then he hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, feeling more alone than ever. This pregnancy, though challenging in its own way, was easier than the first. My morning sickness was mild and my vision remained stable. With renewed determination, I kept working, focused on supporting my growing family, despite everything that weighed on me. As the months passed and my belly expanded, the emotional gap between Bob and me seemed to stretch wider. He spent more and more time at his mother's house, often coming home late at night. One evening, I struggled to put our toddler to bed, my body aching with discomfort. When Bob walked in, I felt a flicker of hope for some help. "Can you read him a story?" "I'm really tired," I asked. Bob glanced at us, then checked his watch before sighing. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help her move some furniture. Don't wait up." The door slammed shut behind him, and a tear slid down my cheek. I looked at my son, his trusting eyes filled with innocence, unaware of my sorrow. Then I glanced down at my growing belly, my heart swelling with love for the child I hadn't yet met. As my 7th month of pregnancy approached, Thanksgiving was just around the corner. The house started to fill with guests in the afternoon. My parents arrived early, my mom immediately donning an apron to assist in the kitchen. Friends and family crowded in, their laughter and conversation adding warmth to the house. Just as I was finishing setting the table for dinner, the doorbell rang again. It was Nathan, Bob's younger brother, and he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Victoria," Nathan announced, his face lighting up as he introduced his fiancée. The room fell momentarily silent before erupting in congratulations. I forced a smile, trying not to let the flicker of envy I felt show. Bob's face brightened at his brother's happiness, and I couldn't help but notice the contrast to my own growing sense of isolation. Judy arrived shortly after, her eyes widening with appreciation when she saw Victoria. "Well, well," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with enthusiasm, "a sight for sore eyes." Throughout dinner, Judy showered Victoria with attention, peppering her with questions and hanging on to her every word. I did my best to focus on being a gracious hostess, but I couldn't help overhearing their conversation. "So, Victoria," Judy said loudly, making sure everyone could hear, "Nathan tells me you're a manager at National Bank. How prestigious." Victoria nodded, her discomfort evident. "Yes, I've been there for about 4 years now." Judy beamed. "You must be doing very well for yourself, unlike some people who can only pop out babies and breed poverty," she added, casting a pointed look in my direction. My cheeks burned with humiliation. I felt the sting of her words, but beside me my mother tensed, ready to come to my defense. I gently touched her arm, silently pleading with her to let it go. Judy's voice dripped with false sweetness as she continued. "Victoria here makes $120,000 a month. Now, that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful." Tears welled up in my eyes. I thought about all the years I'd spent working hard to support our family, paying the mortgage, and building the career I was proud of, all of it now seemingly forgotten. "I think we should continue this lovely evening somewhere more suitable," Judy announced, sitting up. "Victoria, dear, why don't we all go to that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course." Before I could process what was happening, Judy, Bob, Nathan, and Victoria were heading for the door. Bob didn't even glance back at me as they left. The remaining guests, sensing the shift in atmosphere, quickly made their excuses and departed, leaving only my parents behind. They offered to help clean up, but I insisted they rest. Finally, alone, I collapsed onto the sofa, tears flowing freely. Time seemed to stand still as I cried, my hand resting gently on my swollen belly. I thought about how my life had spiraled to this point. Dawn was approaching when, 5 days after my emergency C-section, I felt a sudden surge of strength, both physical and emotional. The doctors were impressed with my progress and gave me the green light to leave the hospital. During this time, Bob hadn't called once. Since he left for San Diego, he hadn't asked how I was doing or inquired about our newborn son. It was clear to me now. Our marriage had reached its end. I reached out to my parents, asking if the boys and I could stay with them temporarily. They immediately agreed, offering their full support. While staying with them, I had the chance to rest and recuperate as they lovingly doted on my sons. I began researching divorce lawyers and gathering the necessary financial documents. A week after leaving the hospital, Bob finally called. I ignored the first 3 calls, letting them go to voicemail, but eventually answered the 4th. "Where the hell are you?" Bob demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Why aren't you at home? I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I'm at my parents' house with our sons. I filed for divorce. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line before he scoffed. Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you? I felt my anger rise. What I've done? You mean abandoning me right before I gave birth? Or draining our savings? Get over it, he shot back dismissively. I'll pay you back, no problem. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. You know why? Because I'm going to be rich. He ranted about Nathan's new wife offering him a job at the bank, their plans to start a financial company, and how they were going to be incredibly wealthy. You never believed in me, Diana. You always shot down my ideas. Well, guess what? I'm free now, and you? You're just a loser who can't recognize potential when it's right in front of her. The divorce proceedings went surprisingly quickly. Bob didn't contest anything, returned the money he had taken, and agreed to pay alimony. When it came to the house, I had years of mortgage payments logged that proved I had been the primary contributor. The judge awarded me the house without hesitation. The day I moved back in with the boys, the house now officially mine, Bob was there packing up his last belongings. As I entered, holding the baby and with our toddler by my side, he sneered. Enjoy this dump while you can, he spat. I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed. He left, and with his departure, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The house suddenly felt bigger, brighter, like it was finally mine again. A year and a half later, life had settled into a new routine. I had returned to work and found a balance between my career and motherhood. Though it wasn't always easy, my boys and I were happy, healthy, and thriving. One ordinary Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my heart stop. The headline read, "Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins." The article revealed a shocking scandal. Victoria, Nathan's wife, had been orchestrating an elaborate con. She had convinced Bob, Nathan, and Judy to invest heavily in a non-existent financial company, draining their savings and even mortgaging Judy's house. Victoria had never actually worked at the bank. The office she had shown them was a rented space, a mere facade for her fraud. She vanished with millions, leaving behind nothing but counterfeit documents and shattered dreams. To make things worse, an extra loan had been taken out to cover Nathan and Victoria's extravagant wedding in San Diego, the same event that had prompted Bob to abandon us. As I continued reading, a whirlwind of emotions hit me: shock, confusion, and, I'll admit, a hint of satisfaction. The aftermath was devastating. Unable to repay their debts, they lost everything: home, cars, even personal possessions, taken by creditors. I heard from others that Judy had resorted to working a cashier job just to scrape by enough for a small apartment and basic groceries. Bob and Nathan were in similarly dire straits, their dreams of affluence completely shattered. As I processed the news, a deep sense of relief washed over me. I had divorced Bob just in time, sparing my children and me from the financial ruin that had engulfed my former in-laws. Just when I thought I had moved on, Judy's number flashed on my phone. Despite my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was weak, a stark contrast to her usual commanding tone. "We need your help," she began, her words laced with desperation. "The children need their father and grandmother," she pleaded, emphasizing the importance of family during these hard times. I took a deep breath, memories of past betrayals flooding back. Thanksgiving alone, being abandoned before giving birth, the constant insults. "Family," I echoed, my voice firm. "You were concerned about family when you left me alone, pregnant and in peril. You weren't worried about family when you drained my savings or called me a loser." Judy tried to interject, but I cut her off. "I'm sorry for your troubles, Judy, but the choices made by you, Bob, and Nathan are not my burden. My children are my priority, and I will not allow your chaos to disrupt our lives. Please don't contact us again." I hung up and immediately blocked her number, feeling the significant weight lift from my shoulders. It was over, once and for all.